What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was forced into the role of king of an all-female hidden village? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. The sky was black with smoke, battle cries mixing with the screams of the fearful and the dying. After 3 hellish days of nightmarish battle, the grand coalition of Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri had broken through to the heart of the village. The results of their revenge could be seen as the streets ran red with blood. Destructive jutsus lanced through the air, felling villagers and buildings alike. The surprise attack had come at the worst possible moment. The evacuation plan created last night, to sneak the civilians out through a secret tunnel to ships waiting in a sea cave, had just been implemented. The enemy shouldn't have been able to find that hidden bay, much less know to strike while their attention was on organizing the escape. Betrayal from within was the most likely cause, but a bitter pill to swallow. These were the thoughts of an imposing man as he strode with grim purpose through the village. Enemy shinobi would flash in front on him, attacking with blades or jutsu, only to be swept aside. Blood-drunk fools, the man sneered. I am Ashara Uzumaki? Brother to the clan head himself. He carried a long staff topped with a brass ring, like that of a priest. However, this staff had crystal prisms adorning that ring, crackling and spitting with lightning energy. Ashara knew that the most powerful foes were busy on the front lines, engaging the last line of the village's defenders. Almost all of the chunin of Uzushio were there, as well as all the junin. That was Ashara's destination as well. He had just left the area where he had been organizing the genin and low chunin protecting the civilian wagon train. He had left a mid-chunin in charge and then went to die by his brother's side. A sobbing cry to one side grabbed his attention, and he saw a Kumo and Iwa nin apparently fighting over a prize. Said prize was a crying, terrified red-headed teenage girl on her knees between the two, with her clothes in tatters. I saw her first, she's mine first, the Iwa nin declared. Fine, but I get to keep the breeder. The Kumo nin granted. The obvious intention of the two, combined with calling one of his precious family a breeder, sent cold fury racing through Ashara. He slammed the butt of his staff on the ground as he cried out, Raiden, electromagnetic murder. Bolts of lightning shot from the prisms on his staff, skewering and frying the two ninjas. The girl on the ground looked up in shock to see a tall aging man, streaks of red in his long graying hair. He had a neatly cropped reddish-gray beard that extended from his sideburns along his jaw to meet up above his mouth, leaving his chin bare. He walked forward, mindless of the blood on the ground staining his deep blue robe that covered a white shirt and pants, tied with a sea-green sash. Shock turned to joy as the girl scrambled to her feet, desperately trying to gather her clothes around her. Ashara-sama, thank you so much, she cried. Without a word, he thrust his staff into her hands. Ashara-sama. She began to question as she then felt his robe settle around her near-naked form. As he was tying off the sash, she began to protest. Ashara-sama, I can't, you don't have to. Hush child, just come with me, Ashara said, retaking his staff and silencing her gently. Brother, wait for me, I'll be there soon. Right now one of our family needs me, Ashara thought. I'm going to escort you to the evacuation caravan, he said as he guided her forward. As she poured out her appreciation, Ashara's attention was already on their surroundings, alert for any ambush. A few blocks down, they came across a sobbing child no older than 3, clutching at a hand protruding from a pile of rubble. The girl rushed to the side of the small boy as he wailed for his mother to wake up. Please carry him, Ashara said sadly. The teenager nodded and gathered the boy in her arms, trying to soothe him. The next block down, they found a lost girl, wandering in confused fear. 2 blocks later a boy trapped in a guard outpost, and so on it went. Ashara had just meant to get the teenager free from would-be rapists, then get back to the fighting. Now he had a long string of children behind him. He had even lost the teenaged girl to an Iwa ambush earlier, as she bravely shielded the children with her own body. He never even learned her name. But to an Uzumaki, all the village was family, and family was to be protected at all costs. That's why all the ninjas Uzushio could spare were fighting to their last breath right now. Just on the slim hope that some would get away. Relief flooded through Ashara as he caught sight of the entrance to the escape tunnel in the distance, with the latter half of the civilian caravan slipping inside. Their Chunin and Genin guards were ushering them through as quickly as possible. That relief turned to dread as battle cries filled the air and Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri forces poured out of the surrounding buildings. Ashara was certain of treachery now. This location was too far out of the way for this many ninja to attack in force, especially forces from all three countries. The civilians were suffering heavy losses as Ashara rushed forward to try and save the outnumbered and outclassed Uzu guards. He was proud to see that after a moment of surprise, even the youngest Uzu genin set themselves for battle, clearly ready to lay their lives down for the fleeing civilians. Ashara created 9 Raiden clones, 6 of them gathering up his young charges and ushering them towards the tunnel. He and his other 3 clones charged, and Ashara winced as he saw many young Uzu nin bodies falling alongside the civilian ones. The enemy was slaughtering anybody they could reach, overturning wagons and setting them alight. Ashara and his clones dove into battle, swiftly cutting down enemies to reach the knot of fighting bodies at the mouth of the wide tunnel. After they cleared enough space at the mouth of the tunnel, the few battered survivors remaining fled inside. The enemy ninja jumped back to gain some space, as many recognized him as one of the most powerful Uzushio had to offer. Many flinched at the angry countenance of Ashara, but continued to surround him. The air was still as Ashara and the enemy appraised each other. No coalition ninja was eager to engage the Red Death, but they had been ordered to secure this tunnel or to sabotage it. "You come into my home, raping and murdering, even killing children before my very eyes," Ashara started angrily. Killing intent flooded from him as he set himself in front of the tunnel entrance, his clones flashing outside the crowd. He and his clones were now in a diamond pattern surrounding the enemy. "You dare to attack my home? You dare to attack my family?" he roared. He and his clones flashed through identical hand seals, all stopping at the same moment. Raiton, 4-pillar bind. 4 basalt pillars thrust from the ground and the clones dispelled, sending their lightning chakra into the pillars as they sizzled to life. Some ninja tried to shunshin away, but were a moment too late as lighting crisscrossed between the pillars, creating a deadly dome prison and slaughtering all within. Ashara held the jutsu until the screams within stopped, leaning on his staff winded, as the pillars crumbled to the ground. He twirled as he felt a tug on his shirt, staff raised, only to see the anxious face of a fresh out of the academy genin. "What do we do, Ashara-sama? More will be coming and all the Chunin are dead," the genin asked anxiously. "Who will lead us?" Ashara looked back at the village in flames, torn between his heart and his duty. After a long moment, duty won out and he turned to place a comforting hand on the genin's shoulder. "Don't worry, young one, I will lead our people to a new home," Ashara said. "Oh, thank you, Ashara-sama. I thought they were going to wipe us all out," the genin replied, rushing back down the tunnel. A shiver ran down Ashara's spine as he considered the genin's words. If he had gone down any other street, if he had not stopped to save that girl, he would have died at his brother's side. And the caravan would have died here. The Uzumaki would have been scattered to the 4 winds. His heart clenched at the possibility. He took one last look at his home and went into the tunnel, collapsing the entrance with a simple Doden jutsu. "Forgive me, brother, this fight I must leave to you. I must see to what's left of our clan. Goodbye." Konoha Night of Kyuubi attack, October 10th. The village hidden in the leaves was reeling from being attacked by a gargantuan fox demon. It had survived annihilation thanks to its leader, Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage. The council chamber in the Hokage Tower was filled with anxious shinobi and distraught, panicky civilians. The noise level was deafening as shinobi couriers ran in and out, delivering reports. The civilian councilors remained underfoot, wailing and harassing the ninjas for news. They were desperate for any word of their beloved Hokage, as well as terrified about the fox demon, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, returning. Silence. A commanding voice cut through the din. All eyes turned to the wizened form of the elderly 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, as he strode through the doors in his Hokage robes and hat, carrying an infant. The 3rd's intimidating presence, as well as the curious sight of him in his old robes and carrying an infant, sufficiently shocked the councilors into quieting down and taking their seats. When the civilian councilors, and the shinobi councilors who were present and not out assisting the village, were seated, they all turned to the 3rd Hokage expectantly. "Commander Shikaku, Are you able to allow your second-in-command to take over coordinating aid and rescue efforts? Hiruzen asked, directing a look to a scarred, brunette man in a green Junin flak jacket. Yes sir, Hokage-sama, the now-named shinobi commander replied. He then turned and quietly issued orders to the man standing behind his chair. The second-in-command gathered up all the couriers and bystanders with a look, rightfully guessing that what came next was council business. Two masked men in black flak jackets armed with tantos, members of the Anbu Special Forces, remained taking up positions flanking the doors after they were closed. Please see, the Hokage was cut off by a frantic civilian counselor. Hokage-sama, where's Namikaze-sama? Is the fox coming back? At this the civilian side burst into questions, talking over each other. The exhausted Hokage cut off the babbling with a hard gaze and liberal use of killing intent. Now, as I was saying, please seal the room and allow no one in until I say. Hiruzen calmly ordered the Anbu. One nodded and activated a glowing seal on the doors. All eyes were fixed on the Hokage, and several of the shinobi thought he had never looked as old as he did right then. The room remained silent as the Hokage gazed down at the infant in his arms. The civilian side looked like they were about to explode with anxiety, so Shikaku decided to head them off. Hokage-sama, if I may, do you have an update on the situation? He inquired respectfully. The Hokage sighed and brought his head up. Minato-kun is dead, he stated simply. As predicted, this elicited an uproar from both sides. How? When? What about the fox? We're all gonna die. The third simply closed his eyes and let them vent a moment as he tried to compose himself. He had lost both his friend and successor Minato, along with Minato's secret wife Kushina Uzumaki, whom the third loved like a daughter. They had died in front of his eyes, as he could only watch from the other side of a barrier Minato had put up while sealing the Kyuubi. But, the most painful loss was that of his gentle and devoted wife, Bawako. He steeled himself by remembering that he had a village to stabilize, as well as the future of the frail infant, currently wailing in his arms due to the noise. Enough. There is more. The firm voice of their leader was sufficient to cut through the din and return the counselors to their seats. The Kyuubi is no longer a danger to us. Minato-kun, may he rest in peace, sealed the Kyuubi away into this poor infant. This announcement was met with shock, then both sides erupted again. The civilian side, as well as a couple of the more ignorant shinobi, started calling for the infant's death, thinking that the fourth sealed the Kyuubi into a child so that it would be easier to kill. Some of the other shinobi counselors were all clamoring for a plan to raise or adopt the child as they understood what power the child could learn to wield when he grew older. The Hokage was taken aback by this, and realized that the poor child could upset the balance between the clans without even trying. He had hoped that the village would see the child as a hero like Minato had wanted, but all they saw him as was as a weapon or a monster. Looking to the side, he caught the contemplative gaze of his lifelong rival, Danzo Shimura. Hiruzen could practically hear the gears turning in Danzo's head as to how he was going to obtain the boy, and turn him into an emotionless puppet tool. Hiruzen decided to fall back on the emergency contingency plan he and his student, Jiraiya of the Sannin, had come up with. For the boy was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of two of the most powerful ninja in Konoha. Hiruzen now knew that he had to conceal that fact to protect the boy. This time the Hokage simply pumped out killing intent to shut everyone up. When the chamber was silent again he spoke out. This child is no monster. He is the Kyuubi's vessel. I am now declaring this an S-class secret. Do not reveal his status to anyone. On pain of death, he ordered firmly. In his heart Hiruzen knew the entire village would know in a day, but he hoped this would at least help with those Naruto's age. Furthermore, he will not be assigned to any clan. He will be placed in an orphanage until we can make a better plan for him. Hiruzen continued. He looked directly at Danzo as he finished, with a firm gaze. There is no way in hell I'll let you turn Naruto into one of your puppet root soldiers, Danzo, the Hokage thought. What is his name? A blonde man with a ponytail, 2 strands of hair framing his face and a Junin flak jacket spoke out. Now for the second part of the plan, thought Hiruzen as he responded. He made a show of looking down at the infant, deep in thought. His name will be Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki Inoichi-san. Is he an Uzumaki? Inoichi asked with surprise. No, he will be named Uzumaki after Kushina Uzumaki, who died helping Minato-kun seal the Kyuubi, to honor her. Hiruzen continued. He then glanced up at the red swirling Uzumaki clan sigil that adorned the space above the doors. There should always be an Uzumaki in Konoha, he said solemnly. Kushina Dono's dead too, screamed out a feral-looking brunette woman with 2 red fang clan marking on her cheeks. Yes, Sume-san, I am sorry. The Hokage replied sadly. Sume slumped back in her chair. Kushina had always been a kunoichi that other kunoichi should aspire to, and Sume had a great deal of respect for her. Alright, I think that is enough for now. We have a lot of work ahead of us tonight. Go and help wherever you can, the Hokage said. As the council filed out, the Hokage gazed down at the now peacefully sleeping infant. Poor Naruto-kun, what a burden for one so young, he muttered. Hiruzen then strode purposefully from the chamber to make arrangements with the Anbu commander to protect Naruto. Konoha Merchant District 3 years later. A friendly-looking elderly woman walked down the market streets of Konoha, pushing a small cart ahead of her. As she wandered from produce stall to produce stall, she would add different fruits and vegetables to it. Many called out friendly greetings as it was apparent she was well liked. Hiko-chan, here, I have a bushel of rice for you and those kids, a wrinkled, sun-browned farmer called out to her. With a light blush, Hiko pushed her cart over to his stall. Thank you, Nobu-kun, Hiko replied. Of course, Nobu said jovially. How much do I owe you? Hiko asked. Nothing, as always, he replied. Hiko planted her fists on her hips. How many times do I have to say you don't need to constantly feed us for free? Hiko demanded, but the effect was somewhat spoiled by her lips twitching into a grin. At least once more, like always, laughed Nobu. I was an orphan once too, so I appreciate what you're doing for those kids. Especially poor little Naruto. At this, Hiko looked a little downcast. Poor child can't even step foot outside the orphanage now. And I have to hide him whenever potentially adopting parents come to see the children. Hiko replied sadly. Hey, cheer up, Hiko-chan. At least he's got you. And you say that the Hokage looks in on him. He should be okay. Nobu said consolingly. You're right, Nobu-kun, I've got to get going. I'll see you next week. Hiko said as she waved goodbye and started toward the orphanage. Nobu waved back and directed his attention back to his stall. Neither noticed the shadowy presence following Hiko. As Hiko turned down a small alley, a man blurred into being behind her. She just had enough time to notice the blank white mask on his face as he effortlessly snapped her neck. She kicked out as he did so, and the man shunshined away with her body, the squeaking cart slowly rolling down the alley, the only proof she had ever been there. Konoha 2 years later, October 10th. A band of traveling merchants had set up their wagons in rows behind the vendor stalls set up for the festival celebrating the defeat of the Kyuubi. A merchant named Mirobu Kamiumi was checking the wagons, on guard for thieves. He was about 5 feet 9 inches, 145 pounds. With shoulder-length hazel hair. He was dressed in merchant's robes with just enough embroidery and jewelry to convey prosperity without appearing to flaunt his wealth or overshadow his customers. A gentle smile could usually be found on his face, but otherwise he didn't stand out much. All of a sudden, he caught a yellow flash out of the corner of his eye. Can't get past me, he thought with a smirk. He snuck around the other side of the cart and quickly reached under and grabbed the person sneaking underneath. He pulled out his prize and was shocked to discover he had a small boy that couldn't be older than his own 6-year-old daughter. No, don't hurt me, I am sorry. Please, sobbed the boy hysterically. Whoa, calm down, little one. No one's going to hurt you. Mirobu said as he grabbed the boy by the shoulders and tried to calm him down. Now that he could get a good look at him, Mirobu saw a scrawny, dirty boy with sun-kissed blonde hair and sapphire blue eyes that were watering fearfully. He also had birthmarks that remarkably seemed like whisker marks on his cheeks. Hush, boy. I promise I won't hurt you, okay? What's your name? Mirobu said gently. The small boy stopped trembling and stuttered out, "Enna Naruto Uzumaki." You promise YUW won't hurt me? Naruto asked fearfully. At hearing the name Uzumaki, Mirobu's eyes widened. Uzumaki? You're an Uzumaki. But you're a blonde. Mirobu exclaimed. At this, Naruto's face screwed up in confusion. What What does that mean? Naruto asked. At this point, Mirobu truly noticed how malnourished he was, and dressed in rags. Mirobu pushed his curiosity about Naruto's lineage to the back of his mind. Never mind Naruto-san, it's nothing. Hey, are you hungry? My wife is an excellent cook, and I'd like you to meet my daughter. She is about your age? Midori trailed off as a confusing parade of emotions flashed by on the boy's face. Hope followed by joy, then apprehension, then fear, then schooling itself into a dead stoicism that was shocking to see on the face of a child. Naruto-san, are you okay? What's wrong? Mirobu asked, his voice laced with compassion. You mean it? Do you really mean it? This isn't a joke, right? The way wariness overlaid the desperate hope in Naruto's voice made Mirobu's heart clench. No, Naruto. This is no joke. Please come with me, okay? Mirobu said gently and released Naruto, walking towards the wagon that served as his home. He kept glancing at Naruto out of the corner of his eye, confused at the way Naruto crept along a pace behind him like a wary dog that had been kicked too often. He was both eager and dreading finding out about the blonde enigma. As he neared his home, Mirobu could smell the aroma of his beloved wife Miyuki's delicious cooking wafting toward him. He smirked when he saw Naruto perk up and actually take the lead toward the wagon. The steps attached to the back of the wagon creaked slightly as Mirobu and Naruto ascended. When Mirobu opened the door, the aroma made Naruto close his eyes, inhale loudly, and drool. Mirobu chuckled at the reaction, which made the woman standing at the built-in stove turn towards him. She was a petite woman, standing at only 5 feet 3 inches and 110 pounds. She had beautiful, deep green hair and striking ruby-red eyes. As he caught sight of her, Naruto blushed deeply and shyly hid behind Mirobu, clutching onto his leg. Mirobu's heart melted at that as he chuckled at the change in Naruto's demeanor. He was glad that Naruto was showing him some trust. Miyuki came over to the pair and kneeled down to be eye level with Naruto. Era, it seems we have a guest. And what's your name? Miyuki said, smiling gently. It's Naruto, Naruto said as he tried to burrow deeper into Mirobu's leg. Hello Naruto, my name is Miyuki. It's nice to meet you, Miyuki said. All of a sudden, Naruto detached from Mirobu's leg and moved around to where he could look into Mirobu's face. His face was screwed up into a fox-like expression of confusion. Hey old man, you said your daughter was my age. She's not my age, Naruto said, pointing at Miyuki. What? Miyuki's my wife Naruto, Mirobu replied confused. What? No way. She's way too pretty and young to be your wife, old man. Exclaimed Naruto, pointing an accusing finger at Mirobu. Mirobu growled and gained a tick mark at that. But Miyuki brought her hands up to her blushing cheeks as she laughed. Shaking her head cutely, she was amazed this little boy had endeared himself to her so quickly. She wrapped him up in a hug and was surprised as he immediately started to squirm in panic. Miyuki let him go, shock written across her features. Are you okay Naruto? Did I hurt you? Miyuki asked fearfully. She gazed in concern as Naruto seemed to huddle into himself a little. But then he put his hands behind his head in a sheepish pose as he forced a wide grin with his eyes closed. Sorry pretty lady, I was just surprised is all. I didn't know what you were doing. Naruto got out. It's okay, Naruto. I'm sorry if I startled you. Miyuki said concerned. She glanced up to see Mirobu also looking down with deep concern at the boy. He slowly placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and flinched when he saw Naruto flinch, shirking from the contact a bit. Midori-chan, please come out here, Mirobu called out. There was some clattering and the cloth that separated the cooking area and the living area twitched aside to reveal a chipper 6-year-old. Wearing a short-sleeved brown shirt with tan pants and white sandals, she bounded up to Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes to see a purple-haired girl that had obviously inherited her mother's red eyes. Naruto blushed again, even though the girl was a bit of a tomboy. Getting right up in his face, she beamed a brilliant smile at Naruto. Hi, she chirped, what's your name? Where'd you come from? Are you having fun at the festival? Hey, are those whiskers? Are you staying for dinner? My Okawa-san's the best cook. Come on, I want to show you what I won at one of the game booths. Without waiting for the gobsmacked Naruto to even recover from the rapid-fire questioning, Midori grabbed his hand and pulled him into the front of the wagon. As the curtain fell back into place, Miyuki stood up and looked at her husband with watery eyes. What the hell, Mirobu-kun? Where'd that sweet boy come from? What happened to him? Why does he not even know what a hug is? Miyuki obviously displayed that her daughter got her personality as well as her eyes. During her tirade, she had grabbed a double handful of Mirobu's robes and brought his face down to hers. Mirobu flinched at the flinty glint in her watery eyes and gulped audibly. Easy, my love, easy. I just found him sneaking around the camp, and when I caught him I noticed that he looked starving. Then I brought him here. That's all I know, I swear. Mirobu exclaimed, frantically waving his hands about to prove his innocence. Miyuki's eyes skewered through the sweating Mirobu, who was surprised when Miyuki suddenly called out, Midori-chan. Please look after Naruto-kun for a moment, your father and I are going to talk outside. Okay, Mom, Midori called back. At that, Miyuki dragged a feebly protesting Mirobu out the back door. As soon as Miyuki and Mirobu were outside, Miyuki spun around into Mirobu's chest. Her hands twisted into his robes again and pulled him close. Mirobu calmed down and pulled his wife close, running his hands through her gorgeous waist-length hair. He had always thought that her hair was one of the most beautiful things about her. She slowly calmed down under his tender ministrations, and looked up at her gentle-hearted husband. He gave her as reassuring a smile as he could, considering that his emotions were as tumultuous as hers were. Miyuki's face grew thoughtful. He's an orphan, right? He must be, she muttered as she snuggled into Mirobu's chest. Her eyes closed as she felt calm wash over her, listening to his steady heartbeat. Both Miyuki and Midori had seen many street urchins in their travels, and could easily tell what someone living on the streets looked like. But Konoha was a large enough and prosperous enough village that they ran public orphanages, open to any under the legal working age so that children didn't have to run the streets. Even after the Kyuubi attack, there should still be room. There was no reason that Naruto should be so malnourished. Mirobu's brow furrowed as he tried to unravel the mystery surrounding the blonde boy. He must be. Although, I don't know why he is living in such a state. Nor can I explain why he seems to have little to no experience with human contact. Mirobu replied. He stared off into space above his wife's head. He didn't like the implications that his observations about Naruto brought up. It was like Naruto was some leper, but Mirobu hadn't seen any sign of plague or illness. It worried him. Miyuki frowned slightly as she looked up at the troubled face of her dear husband. All of a sudden Mirobu was startled out of his reverie when Miyuki lightly poked his forehead with her pointer and middle fingers. You look like an old man when you worry like that, you'll get wrinkles. She lightly admonished, grinning. Mirobu's arms tightened around his wife as he smiled gratefully down at her. Suddenly, Miyuki brightened and flashed a megawatt smile at Mirobu. Oh, can we keep him? She chirped. Mirobu's sweat dropped at that. He's not a puppy, Mi-chan. We don't even know his story yet, Mirobu said consolingly, using his affectionate nickname for Miyuki. She pouted cutely up at him, but didn't press the issue. She painted a determined look on her face and poked a finger into Mirobu's chest. Fine, but I'm feeding him until he bursts and he's getting new clothes. Miyuki declared. Mirobu just threw back his head and laughed at his wife's antics. She always knew just how to make him feel better. He leaned in and kissed her passionately, letting the stress of the last few minutes melt away. The couple were so entranced with each other they didn't hear the back door bang open, or the two shapes that burst out. Hey Okawa-san, we're ready to eat you, they're making kissy faces again. Midori spat. The couple separated and laughed at the looks on the two children's faces, who were still afraid of cooties. Alright, you two, inside. Time to get dinner on the table. Are you hungry, Naruto? Miyuki asked. Yata, I'm starving, Datbeo. Naruto shouted out, jumping and pumping a fist in the air. Both adults were happy to see that Midori had apparently had a positive effect on Naruto. They all filed inside, and the meal was soon set out on a table that folded out from the wall. Itadakimasu, they all called out, and heartily dug into Miyuki's excellent cooking. Wow, Miyuki Oba, this is great. Naruto managed to get out through a mouthful of food. He had an onigiri in one hand and chopsticks with yakisoba in the other. He was funneling food into his mouth as quickly as possible, barely stopping for oxygen. The other three at the table just looked on, mouths agape at the spectacle of Naruto gorging himself on Miyuki's food. Finally Miyuki roused herself. "Naruto, slow down. I can see we definitely need to teach you table manners," she admonished. "Swowie," Naruto mumbled before swallowing his mouthful bashfully. He looked down at his plate sadly, with his hands in his lap. Mirobu and Miyuki gave the boy pitying looks, while Midori just giggled behind her hands. Midori then poked Naruto in the side, rousing him from his self-admonishment. His head whipped around in surprise just in time to receive an onigiri in the face. "Hey," he yelped. Then a devious smirk grew on Naruto's face. Midori backed away from the table with her hands held up in defense before her. However, there was a broad smile on her face as well. "I'll get you for that," yelled Naruto as he grabbed a handful of nori salad and lunged at Midori. Squealing with laughter, Midori ducked under Naruto's errant swing and crawled under the table to get away from her culinary assailant. "I'll get you yet," Naruto yelled. He showed a surprising amount of agility and strength as he sprung off the small stool he was using, then jumped up and planted his empty hand on the table, using it to vault over the table and chase after Midori. Midori shrieked happily and ran out the back door, her blonde attacker hot on her heels. The delighted yells and squeals from the playing duo brought smiles to the happy couple remaining at the now messy table. Mirobu flinched as Miyuki suddenly swung toward her husband, displaying the most dreaded of all techniques. The incredibly powerful puppy eyes no jutsu. "He's so adorable. And Midori-chan likes him so much too. Are you sure Tilda we can't keep him?" Miyuki pleaded with her hands clasped under her chin. Mirobu's sweat dropped as he struggled against his wife's power. "Anyo, Anyo?" He was saved when Midori came rocketing back into the wagon and launched herself into her father's lap, crawling up onto his shoulders to get away from the blonde menace. Desperate for a distraction, Mirobu deftly snagged the nori out Naruto's hand with his chopsticks and popped it into his mouth. His plan to stall for a response to his wife backfired, though. He had to school his face to stillness as he chewed. Apparently, Naruto had used that hand to prop himself on the ground at least once, as Mirobu tasted dirt. Nevertheless, he soldiered on, powering through the gritty mastication of the salad. Midori and Naruto were staring at Mirobu with shock and a bit of awe, while Miyuki was struggling to stifle her giggles behind a dainty hand. Naruto couldn't believe his luck as the evening wore on. He played games with the Kamiyumi family, and played with Midori and the stuffed dolls she had won at the festival. He felt safe and normal. Like he wasn't the demon brat or anything else he was called so often that at one point he had forgot his own name. He now knew and felt what a family truly felt like. It sent a deep pang through him at times when he realized it. At those times, Mirobu and Miyuki would look on with pity and compassion, but Midori would only show confusion when she noticed. It finally came to the point Naruto dreaded, when Mirobu and Miyuki were putting Midori to bed. Watching the two parents tuck her in and kiss her goodnight made this all seem like a dream that he was about to wake up from. He wrapped his arms tightly around his torso and turned away to leave. As he was about to sneak back to the lean-to he had set up in an alley, he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. Flinching, he looked over his shoulder to see the warm, caring countenance of Miyuki. "Where do you think you're going?" she questioned softly. Naruto looked down in despair. I need to. I'm going. I'll just," Naruto mumbled. He stood stock still, hands clenched into fists, eyes squeezed shut and leaking tears. He froze when he felt two arms slowly wrap around him from behind. Shush, shush. It's all right. It's okay," Miyuki whispered comfortingly. "You're safe here, and I'm not letting go." Naruto felt so warm and safe within the hug. He was terrified that if he turned around he would wake up from this incredible dream, wet and shivering under his scrap of cloth in an alley. "It's okay, Naruto-kun, it's okay. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you," Miyuki said, running one hand soothingly through Naruto's hair. Mirobu then kneeled down and wrapped his arms around them both. At this the emotional dam burst and Naruto buried himself into Miyuki's lap as best he could, crying his eyes out. Anguished sobs racked his small frame as he purged the scars of the last 2 years. Miyuki wrapped a hand around the back of Naruto's head, bringing him tight against her chest. Naruto didn't realize that the tears flowing down were not just his own, as both Mirobu and Miyuki also let their own anguish leak out, thinking of what could possibly cause such a reaction in Naruto. Midori lay wrapped up in her blanket, hearing her new friend bawl his eyes out. Finally, she couldn't take anymore and crawled out of her bed, sneaking over to the trio, dragging her blanket behind her. Mirobu was the first to notice her, and smiled through his tears, beckoning her over to them. She shuffled over, not quite understanding what was going on, but she couldn't help but feel the raw emotion emanating from her beloved parents and new friend. Mirobu and Miyuki shuffled around and arranged it so that Midori and Naruto were covered in her blanket and embraced between them. The two children soon fell asleep, exhausted from the torrent of emotion they didn't quite understand. Mirobu smiled gently at Miyuki as he cradled the sleeping Midori to his chest. Miyuki responded with a loving smile as she did the same with Naruto. They made their way over to the sleeping area. Luckily, Midori's bunk was already down from the wall, so they simply laid the two children down and covered them with Midori's blanket. Miyuki cooed softly as she watched Midori cuddle into Naruto. She couldn't resist and leaned over to lay a soft kiss on Naruto's forehead. Naruto shifted in his sleep and mumbled out, "Okawa-san." This was enough to bring tears to Miyuki's eyes, and she had to turn away, lest she start crying again. She didn't want to wake the two as Mirobu tucked them in. The couple then went outside to talk over what they just experienced. "I'm keeping him," were Mirobu's first words as he and his wife sat on the back steps. "No one deserves whatever that poor boy has been through." He slipped his arm around her shoulders while staring contemplatively off into the night. "I will not allow this, whatever it is, to continue," Mirobu declared with his jaw set. Miyuki looked up at her husband's profile and was reminded of so many reasons why she fell for this kind and courageous man. She smiled to herself as she snuggled into his side. She felt so warm and secure, and she was so proud of him at that moment. Family was paramount to Mirobu, and she couldn't help but think it had just grown by one more. Not that she minded, of course. Naruto seemed lively enough to handle her tomboyish, headstrong, reckless daughter. Miyuki then huffed out a breath. Obviously Midori had gotten her stubborn nature from her father. She then felt Mirobu quake as he chuckled. "What are you laughing at?" Miyuki questioned. "Oh, nothing, nothing at all, my love," came Mirobu's mirthful reply. Miyuki's eyes narrowed and she poked Mirobu hard in the ribs. "It better had been nothing," she warned. But Mirobu could practically feel her grinning into his chest. He looked up and saw a shooting star. "Make a wish, Haim," he whispered. "The stars are falling for your beauty." Miyuki lightly swatted him in the chest. "You're such a goof," she said, grinning widely. "My wish is—" "Wait, you can't say it or it won't come true," admonished Mirobu. "You're such a goof," returned Miyuki. They stayed like that late into the night. The next morning, Naruto was slowly rousing himself from dreamland, only to discover a comfortable warmth on his side. He was confused since he normally woke up cold and shivering. Looking around, he noticed a wood ceiling above and a cozy wool blanket draped over him. He started to panic at the unfamiliar setting, but then the warmth at his side gave him a squeeze. His head snapped to his left in shock to see a mop of purple hair snuggled up to his chest. All of a sudden, the memories of last night flooded through him. He choked back a sob at the thought of someone finally showing him compassion and acknowledging his existence. He had been ignored and ostracized so long, he still had trouble believing this was real. It seemed like the end to a nightmare that started 2 years ago. The kindly caretaker of his orphanage suddenly disappeared. Afterwards, a replacement showed up that treated him just like everyone else in the village. She called him a demon brat, monster, vile. She cuffed him and punished him for the simplest things. She actually encouraged the other children to bully the demon brat, and told him that no one would ever want him. That he would never have a family. He had no idea why this was happening, and when he asked about the former caretaker, the current one said that Naruto had made her up. Said that the kindly Hiko was a dream, that she was never real. He was given almost no food. All his belongings were given to the other, more deserving kids, and then eventually he was thrown out onto the street. Naruto didn't know it, but she had thrown him out purposefully when the weather started getting colder, hoping he would die in the snow. She even spread the word, discreetly of course, thanks to that foolish law of the Hokage, that the demon brat was out on the streets. Naruto learned very quickly to hide and be invisible, to move through the sewers and alleys. To be caught was to learn pain until his angels in the white animal masks showed up. They always saved him and took away his tormentors, but they never stayed to help. except the one in the dog mask who would always hesitate and sometimes give him treats. After his angels came, the Hokage would appear soon after. He loved the Hokage like a grandfather, but couldn't understand why this was happening to him. Why people either ignored or hated him. After 2 years, he began to think that Hiko actually was a dream, that he had made her up just so he wouldn't be lonely. The Hokage had set him up in an apartment when he found out that Naruto had been kicked out of the orphanage, but the landlord would drive Naruto off if he saw Naruto actually using the apartment. He never spent more than a couple days in there before he was forced out onto the streets. Naruto didn't want to make trouble for the Hokage, so he pretended to still live there when he visited the Hokage. He made a point to say that he would come to the Hokage tower instead of the Hokage having to come to him. He didn't know where the idea or the determination came from, but he wanted to be strong and independent. To stand on his own 2 feet, without running to Hokage Gigi for every little thing. He wanted to be strong like a Hokage, to be recognized like a Hokage, to be a Hokage. The thought of surpassing his Gigi had taken root inside his 5-year-old mind, and he went to absurd lengths with it. Like living under a crappy lean-to in the alley next to your apartment building to prove how strong you are. But at this moment, that could have been another life, happening to another Naruto. He was snapped out of his thoughts when the smiling face of Mirobu appeared in his vision and he felt a warm, comforting hand laid on his forehead. "How about you get on up for me, Naruto? I've got something for you," Mirobu said, turning and walking back into the kitchen area of the wagon. Naruto tried to hide how much he missed the warmth of that hand as it left, but the disappointment that flashed across his face wasn't missed by Mirobu. Naruto extracted himself from Midori's clutches and hopped down off the bunk bed. He headed through the dividing curtain and right away was hit with the aromas of enticing food. He couldn't believe that he hadn't noticed while in bed, even with the little chimney built into the roof of the wagon. "Ah, Naruto-kun," Miyuki greeted, "I have a special breakfast for you today. But my husband wants to see you first. He's just outside," Miyuki said, directing a warm smile at Naruto. As he passed her to go outside, Miyuki stopped him by placing a gentle hand softly on his shoulder. "I'm glad you're here, Naruto-kun. You will always be welcome here." Naruto blushed and shuffled outside, not knowing how to deal with this unexpected situation. When he walked out the door into the crisp fall air, the last thing he expected was ropes tied to the wagon and the tree next to it, draped with blankets. "Ah, Naruto-kun, I have some clothes for you," Mirobu exclaimed. "Just change behind these blankets. I'm sorry if it's a bit chilly, but I did lay a blanket on the ground so at least your feet won't have to deal with that." Mirobu beamed as he held out a bundle of clothes to the boy. "Why? What are you doing? Why are you giving me clothes? Why are you being so nice to me?" questioned Naruto. He couldn't help it, but the cameomas seemed too good to be true. He kept waiting for the trap to spring shut and have pig's blood dumped all over him or something. At that, Mirobu's expression became pained. He kneeled down in front of Naruto and looked him in the eye. "Look, Naruto, I don't understand why you've had such a hard life, only that you have. I don't know how other people treated you, only that it seems to have been very poorly. I don't know what has happened in your life, but I want you to know that my family will always be here for you if you need it. I see a young boy who has had to be very strong, but is also very lonely. A few clothes is the least I could do." Mirobu finished with conviction. He then held out the clothes to Naruto again, who simply took them and walked inside the blanket, changing room, sniffling softly. Naruto simply stood there for a long moment, hugging the new clothes to his chest. Then a spark lit his eye and he excitedly examined his new clothes. He had thick wool socks with black pants, a burnt orange long-sleeved shirt, and shoes that turned out to be a little too big. He quickly swapped out his tattered shirt and shorts. As he finished pulling on the shoes, he could hear a commotion on the other side of the blanket barrier. He heard raised voices and the creaking of a wagon, but it was only when he heard a startled cry from Miyuki and the ring of metal being unsheathed that he got worried. "Miyuki Oba," Naruto cried, lunging towards the blankets. As he neared them, the blankets were ripped aside to reveal the towering form of the Anbu, Inu. "Naruto, are you okay? What happened to you?" Inu exclaimed, as he quickly looked Naruto over. "Never mind, come on, Hokage-sama is looking for you." Inu then looked down to a bored-looking pug at his feet. "Thank you, Pakun, you can go now," Inu said. Naruto was surprised to see a pug wearing a blue vest, with bandages down his right foreleg, and a konoha ite tied to his head. Pakun merely saluted and burst into a puff of smoke. Naruto squawked as Inu grabbed him by the arm and yanked Naruto out into the clearing next to the wagon. "Oi, oi, let me go Inu. I can walk by myself, dat bayo." Naruto yelled as Inu placed him in front of the Hokage, whose face was drawn with worry. Naruto looked to the side to see the Kamiyumi family backed up against their wagon's back door with Mirobu wielding an ornate dagger while facing off against 3 Anbu, his wife and daughter huddled behind him. Naruto could see that the Anbu weren't threatened and were just holding Mirobu there, but it still sent a jolt up his spine. Naruto spun on the Hokage with a betrayed expression. "What are you doing, Gigi? Leave them alone, dat bayo." Naruto spat at his surrogate grandfather with an accusing finger jabbing at him. The Hokage recoiled in shock. Naruto had never spoken with such malice towards him before. The Hokage then glanced towards the Kamiyumi family that was obviously watching the exchange intently. "I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. I just got worried when I couldn't find you. Anbu, stand down." Naruto visibly relaxed when the Anbu put away their blades, prompting Mirobu to follow suit. "Naruto-kun," Midori cried and launched herself at Naruto. Her crying form latched onto Naruto tightly, which prompted Naruto to renew his glare at the Hokage. Hiruzen flinched, unused to such treatment from his surrogate grandson. "Anbu, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Please withdraw until I call for you and create a perimeter. Let no one through." Hiruzen paused as his orders were carried out. "Mirobu-san, Miyuki-san, please accept my deepest apologies." At this the Hokage bowed his head. Mirobu and Miyuki were flabbergasted. They couldn't believe that one of the most powerful men in the elemental nations was making obeisance to them. Please Hokage-sama, don't do that. There's no harm done. Please." Mirobu got out. The Hokage straightened with a gentle smile. "I apologize, sir. I just got worried when I couldn't find Naruto-kun. The Kyuubi festival is a particularly dangerous time for him," Hiruzen said absently while gazing fondly at his favorite blonde, who was consoling Midori as she examined him frantically for injuries. "Naruto-kun, I'm sorry. I want to Apollo." That's as far as the Hokage got before the now recovered purple-haired terror leapt over and delivered a swift kick to the Hokage's shin. The Hokage allowed the girl to deliver the kick, but was surprised at the power she managed to put behind it. "Midori-chan, I am so sorry Hokage-sama. Please forgive us. She's just a child, Hokage-sama." Mirobu apologized rapidly to the Hokage, all the while forcibly making the obviously unrepentant Midori bow in apology. The Hokage couldn't help but think he hadn't seen a glare that potent in a while. The Hokage put a gentle hand on Mirobu's shoulder to calm him. Then he kneeled down to meet the angry eyes of Midori. "Midori-chan, is it? I hope to." Hiruzen started before being cut off when the diminutive firecracker surprised him by poking him in the chest. "You be nice. You're being scary for no reason." "Midori-chan," Mirobu cried, grabbing her away from the aging leader. "Hokage-sama, I'm so sore." Mirobu was cut off as he heard the Hokage burst into laughter. Hiruzen continued to chuckle as he looked into the resolute ruby eyes of the 6-year-old. She had her fists planted on her hips, glaring at him in her best imitation of her mother when angry. "How about we all calm down with a nice pot of tea?" the Hokage offered. Miyuki spoke up. "Excellent idea, Hokage-sama. Please make yourself at home, my lord," she said eagerly. Hiruzen chuckled. "I would be delighted. Please be at ease. I am grateful for the regard you have shown Naruto-kun." The Kamiyumis relaxed at that and Miyuki went inside to start a pot of tea. The others all filed into the wagon's cramped kitchen space. Mirobu and Miyuki obviously worried that they couldn't provide better lodgings for the Hokage. Naruto was first to break the silence. "I'm sorry I worried you, Gigi," he said bashfully. The Hokage looked fondly over at him. "I didn't think that anyone would notice if I was gone for a while." At that, all 3 adults frowned at the simple statement's implications. The Hokage was the first to recover. "Don't worry, Naruto-kun. Why don't you take Midori-chan and go play for a bit?" he asked. Naruto was fine with that, but Midori was looking worriedly up at the Hokage. "Okay, Gigi. Come on, Midori-chan. Show me that blackberry patch you were telling me about." Naruto grabbed Midori's hand and led her outside. Silence reigned as Miyuki bustled about making tea. Finally, they were all settled in the Kamiyami's humble kitchen. Mirobu was the first to speak. Anyo, Hokage-sama, we are deeply honored to have you grace our home. Deeply honored, Mirobu declared fervently. At this he exchanged a nervous glance with his wife. If I may, Hokage-sama, I'm a little confused. Mirobu trailed off, unable to articulate his confusion as to why the Hokage of all people seemed to be interested in them. Things weren't adding up. If Naruto was worthy of an Anbu sweep team finding him, then why was he living on the streets, starving? He called the freaking Hokage, Grandpa, for Kami's sake. What the hell was going on? Also, I apologize again for my daughter's behavior, Hokage-sama. Mirobu said, bowing low. I have no excuse. Mirobu said. The Hokage merely inclined his head in acceptance. Mirobu gathered his courage, facing the Hokage resolutely. Please indulge me a moment, if you would, Hokage-sama. Why are you here? Mirobu queried. Why involve myself over a lowly orphan, you mean? The Hokage chuckled. The Kamiyamas jolted and turned to each other reflexively. I don't really know how to respond to that, Hokage-sama, Mirobu returned weakly. The Hokage simply sipped his tea, weighing the couple in front of him with an appraising eye. Mirobu turned to look his wife in the eye, and was unsurprised to find nothing but love and support there. Mirobu steeled himself, squaring his shoulders as he turned back to the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I beg you to allow my wife and I to adopt Naruto-kun and bring him into our family. Mirobu exclaimed, even going the extra mile by going to his hands and knees with his forehead pressed to the top of his hands. The Hokage gazed down at Mirobu, with Miyuki sweating bullets as she and her husband awaited the Hokage's verdict. No, was the Hokage's simple response. Mirobu lifted his head and fixed the Hokage with a dumbstruck expression. What? No? What do you mean, no? Why not? Mirobu exploded. He needs someone. Anyone. What's wrong with this village? Why isn't he cared for already? Mirobu hopped to his feet, fire in his eyes. Miyuki rushed to her husband's side and grabbed his hands, forcing him to calm down. They then felt a terrible, oppressive presence. Almost robotically, they swiveled their heads towards the Hokage. I appreciate your fervor on Naruto-kun's behalf, but my answer remains, no, the Hokage replied firmly. The Kamiyumi couple flinched, knowing that their lives rested in the hands of the man Mirobu just erupted at. I understand, Hokage-sama, and I apologize for my rudeness, Mirobu said, bowing deeply at the waist. Please forgive me, and my family. The oppressive presence lifted. Mirobu remained in this position and was shocked to feel a hand lightly place itself on the back of his head. Please rise, Mirobu-san, the Hokage said. You are an honorable man, but there are larger concerns at work when it comes to Naruto-kun, he said with a hint of sadness. Mirobu and Miyuki were shocked to say the least. I am sorry, Hokage-sama, I just want the best for Naruto-kun. If we can't adopt him, can we at least look after him while we are in town? Why is he not cared for like he should be? Is there no more room in the orphanages? Mirobu questioned. Hirazen's face tightened almost imperceptibly for a second. It's complicated, but I would count it as a personal favor if you would look after Naruto-kun while you were here. I can already tell that your family has had a wonderful effect on him. The Hokage paused for a moment. He looked behind him and an Anbu appeared at his side. He whispered into the Anbu's ear for a moment. The Anbu nodded and shunshined away. The Hokage then turned back to the apprehensive Kamiyamas. Sipping his tea, the Hokage nodded to Miyuki. This is excellent, my lady. You are truly talented, he complimented. Thank you, Hokage-sama. I am just happy that you enjoy it. Miyuki gushed, a heavy blush adorning her face. Hokage-sama, I hate to say this, but Mirobu started. The Hokage cut him off. You're leaving soon. The caravan has to head out at the end of the month, correct? Yes, Hokage-sama. I'm sorry, Mirobu replied with a hangdog expression. Deserves it, he then muttered. The Kamiyumi couple caught it though, and it just added to the list of inconsistencies about their new favorite blonde. Anyo, can you tell me how old he is, Hokage-sama? For some reason he doesn't seem to know. Mirobu queried quietly. Anguished rage flashed across the Hokage's face for a moment before he quickly schooled it to stillness. He is 5, yesterday. Yesterday was his birthday. The Kamiyamas were shocked, and could hear the obvious sorrow in the Hokage's voice. His birthday, Miyuki said, a hand flying to her mouth. The Hokage flinched at the accusatory tone of her voice. Surprising the two males present, she brought her hand down onto the table with a resounding crack. Well, that's it then. That settles it, Miyuki declared firmly, standing with a fist cocked in front of her. The Hokage actually looked a little nervous as he gazed into the determined eyes of Miyuki. Only to face palm as a beatific smile crossed her face as she said, "I'll just have to bake him a cake, then." Mirobu simply chuckled as he caught the gaze of the stunned Hokage. "You get used to it, Hokage-sama," he said simply, calmly sipping his tea. The trio then settled into comfortable conversation, waiting for the children to return. "It has been a pleasure, thank you for your hospitality," the Hokage remarked as he stepped out of the Kamiyami's wagon. The Kamiyumi couple responded by bowing deeply at the waist. "We are honored, Hokage-sama. Thank you for gracing our simple home with your presence," Miyuki said. "Please return anytime," Mirobu added. The Hokage inclined his head to them with a benign smile. The Anbu he spoke to inside earlier appeared at his side on one knee, startling the Kamiyumi family. He silently handed a scroll to the Hokage and disappeared. Naruto looked up at the Kamiyamas with a smirk, already used to the habits of the Anbu. "This scroll exempts you from any import taxes while selling in Konoha. Also, should you ever require a shinobi escort, we will provide one with a small discount." "Just a small one though, my ninjas still have to eat," the Hokage joked. Mirobu was shocked. Just the tax exemption alone was a huge boon to the merchant. He took the scroll reverently and again bowed deeply at the waist. "Thank you very much, Hokage-sama. I don't deserve this, but thank you," Mirobu said gratefully. "Not at all, I just wanted to thank you for helping out Naruto-kun," the Hokage replied. He then turned and smiled down at his surrogate grandson. "Naruto-kun, can you stop by the tower tomorrow, please?" "Sure, Gigi. See then," Naruto said exuberantly. Chuckling, the Hokage took his leave, waving to the Naruto and the Kamiyamas. The sight of the four of them waving back happily brought a bittersweet smile to his face. He would have loved for a civilian family to step up and adopt Naruto, but they would have to remain in Konoha. The merchant train the Kamiyamis were a part of traveled too far and too often, though. Not to mention they traded along the borders of both Iwa and Kumo. Two countries extremely dangerous to Naruto, especially the former. He glanced to the Anbu ghosting along to his left. "Is the other matter taken care of?" the Hokage asked his shadow. "Yes sir, Hokage-sama. That bald wretch will barely look in Naruto's general direction now," the Anbu replied. All of a sudden, the Hokage could just feel the man break into a wide grin behind his mask. "I told Neko-san what he did, then just stood back and watched," the Anbu clarified. A mirthless smirk stretched across the Hokage's face. "That's almost too mean, Hawk-san," the Hokage said slyly, almost. He knew his cat-masked agent was one of a few of his agents with a strong protective streak when it came to the small blonde. His eyes flickered to Inu scouting the roofs above as his Hokage walked back to the tower. Hiruzen had had to restrain him last night, when they found out about Naruto's true living conditions. Inu was going to kill that idiot landlord on the spot. But now that issue had been resolved and the Hokage personally owned the building. At least he could fix this one injustice aimed at Naruto. One down, only a few thousand to go, the Hokage thought dejectedly. Konoha Hokage Tower, next morning. The Hokage stood at the window as his office, staring out over the village under his care. One particular inhabitant was at the forefront of his thoughts. He had been very briefly tempted to say yes to the Kamiyami's offer. But it would have put all of them, and especially Naruto, in untold amounts of danger. If the word got out that a Jinchuriki was on the loose, wandering about with civilians of all things, it would be a feeding frenzy. Not to mention if anyone from Iwa or Kumo got a good look at him. He looked more like Minato-kun every day. Plus, it might be a slight bit of jealousy on his part, but the Hokage didn't fully trust that they had become so like a normal family so quickly. So willing to take the boy after just one night. The Hokage sighed as he sat at his desk, glaring at the stack of paperwork his secretary had dropped on him. His mind flashed through a half-dozen low-level fire jutsus, wondering which ones he could use on the stack, without damaging his desk. His fingers had just started to twitch as he had settled on a jutsu he'd gamble with, when the door banged open and Naruto walked in. "Hey Gigi, what's up?" said the grinning blonde. The Hokage was pleased to note that Naruto seemed in fine spirits today, likely an effect of being around the Kamiyamas all day yesterday. All of a sudden, one of his personal guard flashed into being next to the boy. Neko kneeled down and pulled him into a hug. Naruto yelped in surprise before accepting the embrace, then yelped again when Knuckles met Scalp. "Do you know how much you scared us, Naruto?" Neko scolded, fists on hips. "We looked for you all night." "Sorry Neko-ne-chan, I was just looking to hide from the festival, I didn't want to worry you guys." "I'm really sorry. Thanks for looking though." Naruto grinned, putting his hands behind his head sheepishly. The Hokage and the 4 Anbu in the room stiffened at Naruto nonchalantly announcing he needed to hide from the Kyuubi defeat festival. Neko's breath hitched and her arms went slack at her sides. Naruto looked up at her, worried she was still mad. "I won't do it again, okay? I'm just glad you're alright," Neko said. She then bopped him lightly on the head. "No more disappearing acts though, understood?" she asked as she ghosted back to her position behind the Hokage. "I can't take another," she whispered, though no one caught it. The Hokage took a moment to regain his own composure. "Well Naruto-kun, there is a couple things I wanted to discuss with you if you have the time," the Hokage started. "First off, I want you to be indoors in your apartment every night." "Every night, am I understood? The only exception is if you were invited to sleep over somewhere as a guest. Like at the Kamiyamis for example. No more living on the streets," the Hokage ordered firmly, his steel-gray eyes pinning the young boy. Naruto gulped and nodded nervously. The Hokage's face softened. "Good Naruto-kun. I've already taken care of the problem with your apartment, but if anything else comes up you let me know, alright?" The Hokage didn't miss the flash of rebellion that rippled across Naruto's face when he mentioned that he had taken care of Naruto's problem. "Listen Naruto-kun, at times it's good to be strong, other times it's good to be smart and ask for help." The Hokage gazed down at the Jinchuriki with a prim but compassionate gaze. Naruto met that gaze defiantly for a moment before huffing out loudly in defeat. "Okay Gigi, whatever you say," he grumbled, crossing his arms over his chest as he pouted. The Hokage smirked at that, but decided to move on to the next point. "Next, I want to ask you a question. What do you want to be when you're older?" the Hokage asked. Naruto was thrown for a loop by the question. Of all the things he expected the Hokage to ask, this obviously wasn't one of them. But he only needed a moment to answer. "I'm going to be the Hokage, Datbeo. I'm going to protect all my precious people in this village they call home." Naruto exclaimed, punching a fist in the air. His reaction brought a smile to all present. "I'm going to make everyone finally acknowledge me, and see who I really am," Naruto declared with a broad grin and his right hand extended in a thumbs up. The 5 other occupants in the room felt their smiles dim and their hearts sink a little at that. The Hokage recovered quickly though. "Well good Naruto, I'm proud of you. I can see that you will be a fine shinobi, and that the will of fire will burn brightly within you. To be honest, I expected you to say something like that. Since that means you're going to enter the Ninja Academy, I thought you should get a little head start on what you'll be doing there," the Hokage stated. Naruto's eyes shone and he ran up to the desk excitedly. "Really, Gigi, you mean it?" There were practically stars in his eyes. The Hokage chuckled and ruffled his surrogate grandson's hair. "Of course I mean it, Naruto-kun. I'm going to have you trained as much as you can handle before you enter the academy. First off, though, you will see Chohiku-san from the academy. She's a physical therapist and nutrition specialist, so she can help you get started." The Hokage reached into his desk and took out a scroll, handing it to Naruto. "This is for her or any teachers that stop you, to answer any questions. Just go to the academy and ask to go to the nurse's office. She should be there most of the day." "Yata," Naruto exclaimed, punching his fist the air, "I'm going to be Hokage for sure. Hold on that hat old man, I'm coming to take it soon, Datbeo," Naruto declared before dashing out of the room excitedly. Hiruzen chuckled, as he always enjoyed seeing Naruto in fine spirits. He reached for the intercom to talk to his secretary. "Please ask Inoichi-san, Choza-san, and Shikaku-san to come see me at their earliest convenience, please." "Thank you." The Hokage sat back in his chair steepling his fingers and thought. It's time to see if this little experiment I thought up last night will work. I'm sure that enough time has passed so that he will able to interact with the clan heirs. Luckily, there are several his age, and if I make the offer to all the clans, there is no show of favoritism. I hope, the Hokage thought to himself. He fervently hoped that the clan children would be given a chance to form bonds with Naruto, something he desperately needed. He knew he was gambling, though. He knew that the claim of one clan or another trying to make the village's hidden weapon loyal to their clan above the others could cause friction and division. But he also hoped that at least some of the clansmen would see Naruto as more than just a Jinchuriki, and see him as the bright, rambunctious boy he loved. What if he hadn't found Naruto that morning? What if the Kamiyamis had asked him to come with them and just left? Would he have gone? The Hokage really wanted to believe that he wouldn't, but honestly couldn't blame the neglected orphan if he had. The only people who treated Naruto with any kindness were himself, his secretary, a few Anbu, and that ramen chef and his daughter that moved to Konoha last year. A handful of people to outweigh the collected scorn and malice of the entire village. Not a smart gamble. Hell, Tsunade-chan wouldn't touch that one. And his wayward student gambled on anything. The final push for the Hokage taking this risk was the thought of his old rival, Danzo, getting his hands on Naruto if he left the village. The thought of the life being driven from those mischievous blue eyes, of Naruto fading away to be replaced by a puppet imposter in his body. That was all that was needed for the Hokage to risk making relations between the clans a little more rocky. Besides, the Uchihas were already doing their level best to do that on their own, and the village still stood. The Hokage was brought out of his musings by a knock on the door. Enter. The door opened to reveal Inoichi and Choza, a hefty-looking man with long, spiky red hair and purple clan markings on his cheeks. He wore a light armor set patterned after the samurai, with the kanji for food written on the plate. The Hokage looked up in confusion. "Where is Shikaku-san?" he questioned. Inoichi gave him a dry look. "You said, at his earliest convenience, Hokage-sama. He could show up next week in all honesty," Inoichi smirked. The Hokage face palmed at his commander's legendary lethargy. "Such little respect, I feel so underappreciated. Maybe I should go home and take a nap." The laid-back voice of Konoha's Junin commander drifted in, as he strolled through the doors. The Hokage straightened and fixed the three clan heads with a piercing look. Shikaku even snapped to attention, sensing his leader's seriousness. "I wish to talk to you three of a matter of great import to the security of this village. Our Jinchuriki, he needs bonds. He needs reasons to stay loyal to this village or he will end up rejecting everybody and going rogue, like Han from Iwa," the Hokage stated seriously. He now had all three's undivided attention. "I have a plan, a way to avoid this," the Hokage continued, "and it involves all of you. I plan to introduce Naruto-kun to the clans. I feel that you three would be the best starting point. I also trust that you won't be biased towards Naruto-kun because of his tenant." The Hokage put special emphasis on this last word, along with a hard gaze to all three that made them gulp audibly. "No, Hokage-sama," the Ino-Shikacho trio replied. The Hokage nodded. "Thank you, my friends. I plan on having Naruto-kun getting tutelage from as many sources as I can. Who wants to host him first?" Hiruzen questioned. The trio looked at each other, communicating without words due to their long-time association. Choza spoke up. "How about we all introduce him to our clans at a big barbecue?" "That's brilliant," Shikaku then spoke up. "It makes it much less obvious, and a great deal more fun for the kids." The Hokage smiled. "Very good, Choza-san. Let's go with that. I will entrust all the details to you." Dismissed. Inoichi, Choza, and Shikaku filed out of the office and left to set up for Naruto's big shindig. Back at the Kamiyami's wagon, Mirobu was deep in thought as he considered the puzzle that was Naruto Uzumaki. He had asked around town trying to get more information to work with. That had only made him more confused. Confused and angry. The villagers responded to his inquiries by warning him away from the demon child. That he would corrupt his family, and that Midori wasn't safe around him. Many literally spat on the ground as soon as his name was mentioned. As if just hearing it left a bad taste in their mouth. He at least made some headway into the fact that Konoha had a blonde Uzumaki. A store owner told him that the last Uzumaki in Konoha was a powerful and popular kunoichi. She was killed helping the fourth Hokage, and Naruto was given her last name to honor her. Mirobu was disappointed that Naruto wasn't an Uzumaki, but it felt off to him to give a random orphan the clan name of a local hero. What made Mirobu so thoughtful was the drunk he had talked to. He had said how the fourth Hokage had kicked that little demon's ass, and was why they had a bitchin' festival every October 10th. That they should use the festival to finish the demon off, once and for all. The pieces were there, he could feel it. The fact the festival was held on Naruto's birthday couldn't be a coincidence. The fact he was named after Kushina Uzumaki. Mirobu jerked in surprise. Kushina died helping the fourth Hokage. They both had died while battling the Kyuubi. That was it. All the pieces fell neatly into place. It was the only explanation. Why the festival was on Naruto's birthday. Why he was named to honor Kushina. Why there was so much hatred and scorn from the village. Why he was shunned like a leper. And, finally, why the Hokage was so desperate to know his location when he went missing. Mirobu felt like he had been punched in the gut. Naruto. Little Naruto. Kind, fun-loving Naruto ate Jinchuriki. Mirobu couldn't believe it, but nothing else made sense. Suddenly he dashed over to his writing cubicle and ripped the folding desk down so hard, he almost ripped from the wall. They had to know about this. He would have to get an emergency message out through his contacts. The fact that Naruto was a Jinchuriki was a big deal, but Mirobu had a sneaking suspicion that the Uzumaki story was a lie too. He hoped this wouldn't cause trouble for Naruto, but he had a job to do. The early morning light broke through the trees, illuminating a rustic two-story dwelling on a hill. The hill overlooked a moderately sized fishing village on the southwestern coast of Rice Country. Rice is a small country, mostly unnoticed by its intimidating neighbors Land of Fire to the north, and Land of Water to the northeast. Its small, but growing economy is overshadowed by the larger merchant country, Land of Tea, to the west. Rice is primarily an agricultural country, the interior on both of the main islands in the nation being planted with its namesake, and the coastlines were dotted with fishing villages. Rice Country began to change when a bedraggled group of refugees made landfall at the larger northern island. The people of Rice are a kind, humble people who were happy to help get the refugees back on their feet. The Uzumaki refugees were very grateful. Once they established a small settlement on the smaller southern island, the Uzumaki sent back a yearly gift of fish, pearls, and sea salt to the village that had helped them. Their ships cannibalized for raw materials. The settlement, Sanctuary, took 2 difficult years to get on its feet. Ashara Uzumaki stood gazing out the bay window on the second story of his modest home. This day would normally be the day he sent his gifts to that generous village, Landfall. But after 15 years, Landfall's grateful headman had arrived yesterday, and said that the Uzumaki's debt was paid in full. The Uzumaki's tribute had doubled the size of the then unnamed village. The Uzumaki had chosen wisely, as there were many oyster beds with juicy oysters hiding big, fat pearls at Sanctuary. Aside from the abundant fishing, the Uzumakis had developed a way to mass-produce sea salt as a luxury food item. The sea salt tasted better than mined salt, and was popular with well-known chefs. Very trendy with many daimyos at present. Not to mention the benefit of ample amounts of fresh water reclaimed from the evaporation process. However, the escape from Uzushio had still cost the Uzumaki clan dearly. When the survivors had made it to the evacuation ships, Ashara was horrified when he realized they only needed 1/3 of the waiting ships. He had grimly ordered that the supplies on the extra ships be offloaded as quickly as possible, then destroyed those ships. He made sure to have any who could use as many differing chakra-natured attacks as he could find. He had held out the thin hope that the coalition would think that its forces had successfully massacred all the civilians, and destroyed the ships. The idea that they had been ambushed and destroyed after completing their mission was a stretch, but the Fuinjutsu traps in Uzushio had claimed many coalition lives before then. This day always made him contemplative. Every year, he wondered if Iwe or Kumo still had any feelers out, looking for them. He didn't worry so much about Kiri, as it seemed Kiri would be descending into civil war in the next year or two. He wondered about what had happened to his youngest niece, Kushina, sacrificed to Konoha as a Jinchuriki. He hadn't heard anything from her, but the world did think the Uzumaki were dead. He wondered about the ships lost in the sudden storm that had sprung up and surprised the small fleet, just as it had rounded the tip of the Land of Waves Peninsula. The evacuation fleet had been sailing at night to throw off pursuit and gain as much distance from Uzu Shiogakure as they could. This made keeping the fleet together impossible as the storm raged, and they lost another third of their ships. Ashara growled when he thought about the confirmed fate of one ship. That ship had managed to make landfall in Wave, but were immediately set upon by pirates. The exhausted crew put up a futile, meager defense, but all aboard were captured easily. The pirates then promptly sold them all into indentured servitude, as slavery is technically illegal. The Uzumaki have been sending what ninjas they could out into the world ever since, trying to find hints of their wayward brethren. The last 17 years had taken a toll on Ashara. His hair was now completely white and he had accumulated an impressive amount of wrinkles, mostly around his eyes from reading reports until late into the night. His guards told him to take it easy at times, but they knew the stubborn clan head would still work himself into the ground regardless. Ashara turned when he heard a respectful knock at the door. Shaking himself from his dark thoughts, Ashara sat down at his desk that was made from planks of his former flagship. "Enter," he called. The door opened to admit a small, middle-aged man in a tasteful business suit. He had a thin mustache and his short, dark hair was parted down the middle. With his round, wire-frame glasses, he looked like the quintessential accountant or bank manager. "Ah, Toshi," Ashara said warmly, "please, come in. Have a seat." Toshi nodded and sat in one of the chairs arranged in front of the desk. "What can I do for the Namikaze family today?" Ashara asked. "Well, there are several items I must bring to your attention, Ashara-sama." Toshi had a deep, cultured voice that was surprising for his small frame, which barely topped 5 feet. Ashara waved for him to continue. Toshi nodded as he opened the folder he had brought with him. "Most importantly, these are the latest scouting reports from the search parties in the Sakura Sea. I believe they have found a good spot for your hidden village. Inside a chain of atolls, they found a volcanic island. It is actually a very fortuitous find." Ashara was a bit surprised by the excitement in Toshi's voice. He was normally a very reserved man. Ashara simply waved his hand for Toshi to continue. The reefs form a natural barrier, and it took the scout team quite a while to find a way through. I'm told they needed extensive use of the rebreather seal. An excellent invention that, Ashara-sama, Toshi said. Ashara leaned back in his chair, smiling. His protege and fuinjutsu addict, Ryusuke, had come up with that seal after extensive study of fish gills. The ability to breathe underwater was a huge boon for their fishing and pearl diving industries. After finding a safe path for the ship, they found that the island was dormant and safe. Toshi continued. "Are you certain? No magma activity, whatsoever?" Ashara questioned. "None, my lord. This team luckily had a ninja with a strong Doden affinity. He delved as deep as he could. He reported he felt no activity at all," Toshi said with a satisfied grin. "Furthermore, this volcano is very large, with lava tubes formed both above and below sea level. The caldera is sunk deep underwater, creating a natural bay inside the volcano. What's more, a rather large lava tube extends underwater and connects with that bay." Toshi's grin was getting infectious as Ashara saw where this was going. "That is not even the best part, my lord. There is a significant amount of volcanic soil above sea level, which we can expand by sealing some lava tubes and pumping out the water." Toshi finished triumphantly. Ashara was speechless. This was perfect. Natural defenses both with the reef and the exterior of the volcano, as well as a preformed bay that connected to an underwater entrance. He would have to put Ryusuke, and possibly his brother Kenisuke, to work on seals that would grant them passage via that route. And to top it all off, to have fields with volcanic soil. The best possible soil to work with, bar none. Ashara could see what had got Toshi so excited. "Excellent, my friend, excellent. Recall the other search teams immediately and get all available Doden users and engineers over there as soon as possible. I want the construction of Himitsugakure started yesterday," Ashara ordered. As always, Toshi smirked at his friend's dry humor. Only he would name a hidden village, the village hidden in secret. Of course, the Uzumaki clan and their vassal civilian families would do their best to have it remain hidden in secret for as long as possible. Toshi was happy to see Ashara's spirits lifted. The man tended to brood too deeply when this day came around. Toshi remembered all too well what the Namikaze family owed to the Uzumakis. As the official head of the Namikaze family, Toshi did as much as he could to help them. The Namikaze family had been the first to be evacuated from Uzushio, and they had been lucky enough to be on the ships that made it to landfall. Once they got over the shock of Uzushio's downfall, the civilians realized just how much the Uzu shinobi had sacrificed for them. They had gathered together, and had all asked to be absorbed into the Uzumaki clan. Ashara had graciously accepted, even finding potential shinobi for the small academy being built in Sanctuary. The only two families he refused were the largest, and what used to be the largest, the Namikaze and the Hyafuda respectively. When he refused them, Ashara had been quick to explain. To the Hyafuda family head, Jumanji, Ashara said he felt that the Hyafuda name needed to be honored and remembered. The Hyafuda had volunteered to be evacuated last, taking heavy losses in the ambush. Ashara had even seen civilian Hyafudas picking up weapons and fighting back. Plus, 2 ships carrying many Hyafudas were in the fleet vanguard when the storm hit, and were lost at sea. Ashara had said that they had sacrificed enough, and that they needn't sacrifice their name. Jumanji had never looked prouder, and that magnanimous gesture had earned Ashara the undying loyalty of that clan. Turning to the man that would become his chief advisor, Ashara then spoke to Toshi Namikaze. The Namikaze were a shrewd and prosperous merchant family with connections throughout the elemental nations. They had been the driving force behind Uzu Shiogakure's economy. Ashara was going to lean on those ties heavily to rebuild his clan's wealth, and improve the quality of life in the land of rice. The Namikazes had always had strong ties to the Uzumakis, even though there was a large amount of extended family in Fire Country as well. They would become the backbone in building the merchant fleet that was now slowly giving Rice the ability to challenge tea for economic supremacy in the Sakura Sea. The merchant fleet was even now extending its range all along the eastern coast of the Tea Peninsula, reaching as far south as Sea Country and Sakura Country. They did not dare to venture north just yet. Kiri was too close for that, and there were rumblings of economic strife coming out of Wave. Toshi shook himself out his reverie. Honestly, I'm getting to be as bad as Ashara-sama, he thought. Reaching into his folder, Toshi pulled out the next stack. The second item concerns your student, Ryusuke. He believes that the first phase of his mission is complete and wishes to visit Sanctuary. He believes that he can launch the second phase at any time, Toshi reported. Finally sick of those sea rats, is he? How long has it been? 2 years. Ashara chuckled. 3, my lord, Toshi corrected, then a grin came and went on his face. I assume Hidoki would be happy to see him, Toshi said slyly. He was surprised when Ashara's face drew down into a worried frown. I'm not so sure about that. The sudden departure of Ryusuke was his choice, not mine. He came in here begging for a long-term mission. Apparently, he and Hidoki had a falling out and he couldn't stand being snubbed by her. This is not a big enough village for them to avoid each other, Ashara said solemnly. Toshi was very surprised. He had seen Hidoki upset after Ryusuke left, but he had assumed it was because she missed her childhood friend. But before he could ask further, Ashara clapped his hands as if to bring himself back on track. Alright, what's next? Toshi let the matter drop. He wasn't going to pry into another's personal affairs. Next, my lord, are the quarterly fishing yields. Ashara sighed. How he loathed paperwork. Konoha Clan District, October 16th. Naruto walked slowly behind his dog-masked Anbu protector, Inu, as they made their way towards the Akamichi compound. He never expected this when Hokage Jiji asked him to come to the tower this morning. Naruto didn't quite know how to feel. He felt hope rise within him when he thought about what Jiji told him. Naruto-kun, I have some friends who wanted me to invite you to a barbecue. They wanted to introduce you to some children of theirs, and see if you would like to be friends with them. How does that sound? How did that sound? It sounded great. Naruto ruthlessly squashed the hope back down. He had been down this road too many times. For the past 2 years, a heart-rending roller coaster of emotion would happen time and time again. He would sneak past the parents at the local playground, and start playing with other kids. Until the parents noticed, he would be having fun. It wasn't always easy to join this group or another, but his natural cheer and exuberance usually won out. He was very popular when it came to playing ninja, due to his forcibly increased stealth abilities. He would be happy. And then, the inevitable would occur. Even if he managed to say goodbye to whatever new friend he had made without their parents noticing, eventually he was found out. The child would be yanked away from Naruto and warned to stay away from him. Usually while still within earshot of Naruto. The hope of finally making a friend was to be dashed again. The happiness that Naruto had got to taste would shrivel up and turn to ash. He couldn't help but repeat this cycle again and again, even though part of him knew what would happen. He really wished the Kamiyamas weren't busy today. He wished Midori, at least, could have come. But they still had jobs to do, even Midori had chores. They had responsibilities to the merchant caravan, and they had put them off while trying to spend as much time as possible with Naruto. But, if they could be nice to Naruto, others could be, right? Then Naruto jerked as he realized that the Kamiyamas weren't from here. He had seen villagers coming up to Mirobu and Miyuki yesterday, obviously talking about him, based on the looks they gave him. Oh no, what if they were just saying they had to work as an excuse? Was it the same roller coaster all over again? Miyuki Oba was so kind. She wouldn't take Midori away from him, right? But the villagers had talked to her and then she said Midori couldn't come out to play today. Now Naruto had very mixed feelings. He just knew that the same thing would happen again. But the Hokage had said that the parents were the ones who had invited him. But usually no one would let their child near him. But Hokage Gigi wouldn't set him up, would he? But maybe they lied to Gigi, and this is a trick. But Gigi is called the Professor, and he's Hokage, and the Hokage's the smartest in the village. But villagers did stuff all the time to him, and Gigi would only find out later. But Inu wouldn't lead him into a trap, would he? Inu was always nice to him, right? Naruto's thoughts wouldn't stop chasing each other around and around. This was the most exhausting walk he had ever taken. He didn't notice Inu looking at him worriedly out of the corner of his mosque's eye hole. Finally, Inu couldn't take seeing the warring emotions playing out on Naruto's face. He spun in front of Naruto and kneeled down to eye level. He had to put out a hand to keep the preoccupied boy from walking into him as Naruto looked up in surprise. I'm going to be with you the whole time, Naruto. I'm not letting you out of my sight, okay? You say the word, and we'll be out of there immediately. No questions asked. You understand? Inu reassured Naruto. Naruto wrung his hands in a very uncharacteristic display of nervous indecision. The warring of emotions across his face suddenly stopped, and was replaced by a look of determination. You promise? Naruto asked with just a slight waver in his voice. Inu held out his pinky, I promise. Inwardly, he was very amused that the tough as nails, Kenjutsu-loving, kunoichi badass Neko had taught Naruto the pinky swear promise. But he was also relieved to see how seriously Naruto took it based on how firmly he wrapped his pinky around Inu's. Inu was glad that Naruto was back to, well, closer to his usual self. Seeing Naruto wring his hands had more been disturbing than he would have anticipated. Inu was worried just how much pain Naruto was repressing, and was amazed at the cheerful demeanor he maintained despite it. Not giving Naruto, or himself, time to slide back into dark thoughts, he stood up and started back towards the Akamichis. Inspiration struck him and he grabbed Naruto. With a surprised yelp, Naruto found himself riding on Inu's shoulders. Inu's silver hair being grabbed roughly was a small price to pay for the shriek of laughter that followed. Before Naruto knew it, he was walking through a wide-open double-door gate. On the walls next to the gate was the Akamichi clan symbol. Naruto quieted down when he noticed the noise of a large group of people. He tensed reflexively. Crowds weren't usually good things for one Naruto Uzumaki. Inu felt his legs tighten on his neck, and could guess why. He kneeled down and helped Naruto to the ground. I'm right here. The whole time, he said, holding up his pinky. Naruto visibly calmed down and became more confident. Kami bless you Neko, Yash. Let's not keep them waiting Naruto, Inu said in an upbeat manner. Naruto just nodded, his gaze fixed on the group of people milling together out on a beautiful open meadow to the left of the clan buildings. The adults were chatting amicably over by a set of large wooden banquet tables. Next to them were a trio of impressively sized barbecue pits. They hadn't yet noticed Naruto or Inu. As they got closer, Naruto could see the smaller forms of laughing children running around in the meadow. When they walked by a tree, Naruto immediately noticed a rather large boy trying valiantly to climb up and hide in its branches. Without thinking, Naruto walked over and gave him a boost. The boy almost flew over the branch, catching himself just in time. "Hey, playing ninja?" Naruto asked. The boy just nodded, surprised at the assist. "Okay. Well, you should hug the trunk tighter and move to your left. You'll be hidden in the shadows better," Naruto helpfully informed him. "Oh, thanks," the boy replied, still somewhat confused. "No problem," Naruto cheerfully waved and continued on with an amused Inu. But Naruto's cheer dimmed as he realized Inu was leading him towards the tables. Tables filled with adults. Two women noticed them and broke off their conversation. As they walked over, Naruto froze up until he felt Inu's hand on his shoulder. Naruto relaxed some, then relaxed even more when the women actually smiled at him. The knot in his stomach that had started to form when he first thought the Kamiyamas would abandon him finally loosened. Maybe this was the beginning of the end of all those angry glares and false hopes for friendship. The two women greeted them warmly and directed them to a full-figured woman standing by one of the barbecue pits. She was wearing tan pants, heeled sandals, a high-collared purple blouse with the kanji for food on the back, and an apron. Wielding a wooden spoon with deadly efficiency, she was fending off four large and obviously hungry men. The men all had spiky, red hair and clan markings, making it easy to see they were related. Naruto was a little intimidated by the woman, Inu too, though he would never admit it, as she protected her pork ribs and beef briskets from their drooling attackers. She spotted the two, and waved them over with an inviting smile. As they approached, Naruto could see the kindness in her dark eyes. "So, our guest of honor has arrived," she said cheerfully. Without looking, she smacked an errant hand about to snatch some ribs. "I'm so glad, thwack, to meet you Uzumaki-san, smack. I'm Chiyumi Akamichi, crack, and I'm happy to welcome you to our home, slap." Chiyumi greeted him warmly. Suddenly, she spun and four distinct thumps were heard. The four redheads now sat on the ground nursing their aching heads. "I told you to wait until everyone can eat," she admonished them. She then turned to smile at Naruto. "Now that you're here, we can. Are you hungry, Naruto-san?" she asked. Naruto nodded quickly, afraid to say no. "Great. Find a seat while I gather everybody up," Chiyumi said as she ushered him to a table. "Choza dear, can you fetch everybody for lunch, please?" Chiyumi called to a large man in red plate armor. He turned and gave a hearty smile with a thumbs up. Naruto was amazed as he flashed through some hand seals and grew to the size of a giant. Naruto was now the same height as one of his toes. "Hey everybody, come eat," Choza boomed out. People appeared from every direction and the tables were engulfed in talking, laughing people. The Akamichi clan was a very boisterous, barbecue-loving clan. Throw in the Yamanakas, who were pretty loud themselves, and it made quite a racket. Naruto had been sat next to the quiet boy from the tree, who had been introduced as Choji, with the boy's father Choza to Naruto's left. Apparently, the boy wasn't quiet when it came to food though. Across from him were two large men also dressed in plate armor, fighting over a brisket. A couple Yamanakas down the table a bit then challenged a few Naras to a drinking game. For this game you had to sing a drinking song where you drank at the end of every verse. Your opponent then repeated the last verse and added to it each time. Needless to say, it was quite a raucous event, which was very difficult for Naruto. To the shunned orphan, any gathering or crowd meant jeers and insults at best, pain and suffering at worst. The result being, Naruto developed a moderate case of agoraphobia. The fact that he was surrounded by large men, who he now knew could grow even larger, and the unexpected raucousness made his breathing quicken. His heart was hammering in his chest, and he felt trapped. Desperately, he spun in his seat, looking for Inu. When he didn't immediately see him, he started to panic. He jolted as Choza started to bang his fist on the table, spitting bits of food, laughing at some jest. Hyperventilating now, Naruto clutched a hand to his chest. He jumped when the boy next to him hopped on the bench's seat, reaching across Naruto to grab a pork rib on his other side. Naruto's control broke. "Inu!" he screamed. He jumped off the bench and tore off in a random direction, crying for Inu. The tables went dead quiet as the partygoers watched Inu collect Naruto and Shunshin away. Shock reigned as nobody understood what had happened. They simply looked at each other, dumbstruck. The general thinking was mostly summed up when Shikaku muttered, "Well, shit." Later that day, Hokage's office. "What happened?" the Hokage asked stonily, his eyes hard on the three nervous men in front of his desk. The three audibly gulped and, instinctively, Choza and Inoichi simultaneously looked to Shikaku to explain. "Troublesome," Shikaku muttered. He squared his shoulders and looked the Hokage in the eye. "It was my fault, Hokage-sama. It's clear now I should have taken the possibility of Naruto being agoraphobic into account. I apologize," he said firmly. The Hokage then sighed out in frustration. "No, Shikaku-san, no one is to blame. I will simply have to find another way to ease Naruto into this. I believe it will take longer than I had anticipated," the Hokage stated remorsefully. The truth was he had simply wanted to take his anger out on someone. Inu had returned just a short while ago, after calming Naruto down and treating him to ramen to help him get over his episode. When Inu relayed the details to Hiruzen, he had overreacted, summoning the three clan heads. But now that they were in front of him, Hiruzen realized that the only person he could blame was himself. How could I have let things go this far? How has it spiraled so far so quickly? How can I make this up to Naruto-kun? Hiruzen thought in anguish. The three men stayed quiet, sensing their leader's introspective mood. In truth, they felt guilty as well. Even though it was an accident, they had caused the traumatized boy pain. All three were just starting to realize how badly the boy had been abandoned by the clans, and by the village. All for doing the heroic duty of keeping the village safe from the largest threat it had ever faced. Inoichi suddenly spoke up. "Hokage-sama, I know I've caught glimpses of Naruto in the park over by the southwestern corner of the village." "Yes, that park is just north of his home," the Hokage replied. Hiruzen didn't miss the quick look the three shared when he admitted that. The only residential area south of that park was considered to be the slums. It was a residential area tucked as far from the tower and the city center as it could be. Dive bars, brothels, pawn shops, loan sharks, and black market stalls called that area home. The area was tolerated somewhat as it condensed all the lowlifes into one heavily policed region. No place for a 5-year-old on his own. The Hokage couldn't suppress a wince when they looked back at him. When he found Naruto after he was kicked out of the orphanage, Hiruzen had foolishly sent a Chunin to secure an apartment. While the Hokage took Naruto to the hospital for an examination, the Chunin just took the first place that didn't instantly refuse him when Naruto was mentioned. Signing an ironclad lease, heavily slanted in the landlord's favor, without even reading it first. That lazy Chunin was now a permanent genin, and assigned to solo Tora-catching missions once a month for life. But Naruto still lived in a shithole, located in a cesspool. Forcing his guilt aside for the moment, the Hokage looked at Inoichi. "Did you have an idea regarding that?" he asked. "I do, Hokage-sama. I can bring my Ino-chan to that park until we run into Naruto, and I'm sure that my little princess would make friends with him quickly," Inoichi said, beaming. The other three men just groaned inwardly, amazed at how much he doted on Ino. But the Hokage did have to admit that his was a simple, solid plan. One that might work with the other clan heirs his age too. "Excellent, Inoichi-san, do it," the Hokage replied. "For now, I am going to put the rotating tutor plan on hold until we can get Naruto-kun a bit more socialized. He needs to learn to be around people first. That is all for tonight." "Thank you, you're dismissed," the Hokage said. "Kami, it's like I'm talking about an animal that has to learn how to be human." Hiruzen thought sadly. "Hi, Hokage-sama." The three men saluted and exited the office, each with their own plans to bring a little light into Naruto's life. Naruto's neglected existence that had been conveniently out of sight, out of mind was now placed front and center before them. They each promised themselves not to look away again. While three introspective men were filing out of the Hokage's office, Naruto was leaning on the railing of his balcony staring out at the Hokage monument. Naruto had calmed down and was grateful for Inu being kind enough to treat him to ramen. Inu had also went out of his way to not call Tuchi's or Ayame's attention to his fragile emotional state. Naruto was ashamed and angry at himself. What if he had just lost the one chance to make some real friends, in the village, with kids whose parents didn't hate him? He had wanted to ask Inu to take him back, but the words just wouldn't come. So, he just buried his disappointment in ramen. Looking at the faces of whom he was determined to be his predecessors, Naruto thought over Hokage Jiji's words. Sometimes it's good to be strong. Other times it's good to be smart and ask for help. With an option to improve in front of him, Naruto couldn't maintain his uncharacteristic depression. Shaking his head quickly, he lightly smacked his cheeks and forcibly cheered himself up. Tomorrow's a new day, and maybe Midori-chan can come out and play. Naruto fixated on that hope as he prepared himself for bed. Konoha, an underground bunker. The weapon has been isolated? A gravelly voice asked. Yes, Danzo-sama, he is still very much on his own. I believe that we may be able to bring him to your side very soon, the Yamanaka root agent said emotionlessly. I have a plan to isolate him from the clans permanently, Fu declared. Very good. Go then, and do not disappoint me, Danzo ordered. At once Danzo-sama, Fu said before shining away. Meanwhile in the land of waves to the east. Whistling merrily, a young man walked down a dirt road towards the main shipping village of Nami no Kuni, the land of waves. Standing at 5 feet 10 inches, 175 pounds, he had an athletic build, but he wasn't an overly imposing figure. He had on sturdy black boots, green cargo pants, and a gray t-shirt with mesh under armor that came to his elbows. His red hair was shaved on the sides and back, while the top was grown long and drawn tightly back into a scalp lock and ponytail that curved to the back of his neck. He was modestly armed with weapons pouches on his thighs, and a utility belt with a few scrolls hanging off it. He smiled and waved to a passing group of farmers, who responded in kind. I may be stuck waiting for a while, but at least it's pretty here, he thought to himself. He continued down into the shipping village and stopped at the first inn he saw. After booking a room, he decided to take a stroll and get the lay of the land. He wandered around town for a bit, heading towards the docks since he enjoyed the ocean view. He was just about to head back to the inn, when he heard a commotion off to his right. Curious, he slipped into an alley, which emptied next to a large warehouse. He stopped dead at the mouth of the alley at the sight of 3 thugs forcing an obviously beaten man to his knees in the loading area in front of the warehouse. "Oh, what the hell is this?" the redhead demanded. "Leave him be." The thugs looked up in surprise, then started laughing uproariously. "Clear off, you dumbass. You don't want to be here right now." A scarred gravelly voiced thug armed with a katana spat. "This is our town, scrub." "Yeah, beat it," a weaselly looking man next to him sneered. The man on his knees then looked up at the red-headed newcomer. "I don't know who you are, stranger, but I think you should do as he says. These dogs bite." All of a sudden, an anguished yell could be heard from an adjoining building as 2 more thugs came out, dragging out a pretty brunette girl in a white homespun dress. "Kajumi, you bastards," the man on his knees spat venomously. "Leave my daughter alone." He started to rise when he caught the pommel of a katana to the face. As he sprawled out in the dirt, the thugs laughed viciously. "We're gonna have us some fun tonight, boys." "Hey, Kajumi?" the apparent leader leered at the terrified girl. All of a sudden, all 5 would-be rapists felt a distinct malevolence. Their heads swiveled comically to the red-headed man who was looking down, and whose fists were clenched so tightly they were shaking. "So that's the kind of men you are." The thugs flinched at the steely tone of his voice, as the ambient temperature seemed to drop to freezing. He looked up, and all 5 took an involuntary step back. His cobalt blue eyes promised death and pain in equal measure. The redhead snapped his hands down the holsters at his thighs and withdrew 3 kunai for each hand. The 3 by the kneeling man responded by lifting their own weapons, one a crude club fashioned from a board with nails in the end, and one had a decent tetsubo, while the leader brandished his katana threateningly. The 2 scum holding Kajumi pushed her over near her father, and each drew wicked-looking knives. "Well, don't just sit there, pissing yourselves in fear. Let's do this," the redhead spat. At this the thugs all snarled and started forward. "You stupid little shit, you know who we are? We're part of the Redwater Teeth. All the docks is ours." The leader yelled, "We're gonna learn you to step in our territory. What do you think about that?" "I think you haven't been burdened with an overabundance of schooling," came the condescending reply. The thugs looked at each other confused, as if trying to confirm whether or not they were just insulted. Enough talk. Get him, the leader ordered. All 5 charged down the alley. The redhead smirked as waited for them to get closer. He then brought his arms in front of him in an X, with 3 kunai in each hand. He snapped his hands forward and launched the kunai. The thugs crouched and prepared to dodge, but they all widely missed their mark and embedded themselves into the walls of the alley. Ha ha, what's this? The hero can't even throw straight. Ha ha ha, what the hell you thinking, boy, calling us out? The katana wielder laughed, kill him. The thugs all stood and charged. The redhead simply smirked as the 5 brutes descended upon him. Look away, Kajumi, he said, with a handsome smile in her direction. The blushing girl looked down at her feet, her arms crossed over her torso. He brought his fingers together and flashed through a set of hand seals. Futon wire murder no jutsu. He snapped his hands out wide in front of him as he activated his jutsu. Razor-sharp blades of wind traveled between the wires he had slipped onto the kunai while baiting the dumb brutes. Everything in between his hands and the kunai was neatly dissected. The tang of blood and the sound of meaty gristle smacking the ground filled the air. The redhead immediately dropped the rings holding the wires and shinned to Kajumi's side. He gently gripped her chin in his hand and deftly turned her back on the carnage in the alley. Are you alright? Did they harm you? He questioned gently. The brightly blushing girl in his arms took a long moment for her brain to reboot. Why yes. And no. I mean, yes I'm fine. No they didn't hurt me. Thank you so much. Kajumi gushed as she leaned into her rescuer's chest. What's your name? Kajumi asked shyly. It's Gokuru. Gokuru Uzumaki. Gokuru had a slight blush adorning his cheeks as well, since Kajumi was pressing her rather decent bust up against him. Gokuru then brought the pointer and middle fingers on both hands into a cross-shaped seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 4 perfect clones of Gokuru popped into being, causing Kajumi to somehow blush an even deeper shade of red when the other Gokurus appeared and sped past. Kajumi suddenly thought, 5 of him? Wait, he must be a ninja. Incredulous, she started to turn towards the alley. Gokuru caught her chin again before she could look. There's nothing there you should see, he said somberly. Just then 2 clones appeared carrying her father, his arms slung over their shoulders. Oto-san, she cried. Her father, Hosoke, looked up and smiled. I'm so happy you're okay, my flower, he said weakly. So, you're a ninja, huh? Don't see many of your type around here, Hosoke remarked. Oto-san. Let's get you inside first, Kajumi said worriedly. Gokuru and his 2 clones then helped the duo back into their home, while his remaining clones took care of the body parts littering the alley. Land of River's southeast border with Fire Country. Ryusuke Uzumaki sighed as he gazed out on the quietly curling waves lapping at the beach before him. He then swept his eyes around to the 3 ships anchored in a partially hidden bay inlet to his right. He wanted to go home. He missed Sanctuary. He missed being able to properly experiment with Fuinjutsu and training with Ashara-sensei. But mostly, he missed Hidoki. She might still hate him, but he had discovered that at least being near her was better than not being there. Even if she did hate him. Ryusuke sighed again, more heavily this time. A deep-throated chuckle sounded from behind him. Glancing over his shoulder, Ryusuke was unsurprised to see the barrel-chested form of Tatsuya Sekimoto. Ah, my young friend. A man only sighs such when a woman is involved. I used to sound so when I was young, pining for a pristine maiden. I composed poems and songs, brought flowers and gifts, before finally charming her virginal heart. Tatsuya exclaimed, gesturing like some court bard. Ryusuke's wry bark of laughter split the air. You grabbed some girl in a raid, and locked her in your cabin probably, he shot back. Tatsuya laughed before clutching his chest with an incredibly exaggerated display of injury. Your jaded mistrust wounds me so. All know the Kaikoku OU has a heart of gold. That he treats women as the goddesses they are. Ryusuke just gave the self-styled king of pirates a flat look. He then sighed again. Well, Kaikoku OU, Ryusuke stressed his title sarcastically. I will believe that you managed to somehow sweet-talk at least one woman, since your daughters must take after their mother. Tatsuya gave a booming laugh and sat next to Ryusuke. Slinging an arm around him companionably, Tatsuya looked out over the water with a wistful expression. They do take after their mother, how I miss her so. Strong, smart, beautiful, and able to command a ship as if born to do so. Ryusuke felt a pang of guilt as he was suddenly reminded of his mission. He knew that Ashara-sensei would be very upset with him becoming so friendly with his mark. His mission was to pose as a pirate, and gather as many as he could to be used as needed. That way they could be used for sanctuary's purposes without it leading back to the village. The pirates were very much considered expendable, and Ryusuke forming bonds with them complicated things. Ryusuke had had no qualms about it at first. He had killed his way to the coveted first mate position with a group called the Crimson Oars. He had made great progress bringing together differing pirate factions into what Ryusuke had dubbed the Freebooters Pact. It simply stated that the members wouldn't step on each other's toes and established territories for each faction. If any outside group intruded, or any pact member was caught poaching in another's territory, the others would band together and destroy the offending party. Ryusuke had had to be ruthless at times, and had killed many rivals to gain enough respect to pull it off. But it had also been remarkably straightforward. Surprisingly so for Ryusuke. Looking back on it, he shouldn't have been so surprised. Pirates were not complex people. Prove you're strong, can find treasure, and that you're not stupid enough to get your men killed or captured. All pirates wanted was to sail out, find a fat, easy prize, and return home richer than when they set out. Simple. But it had gotten complicated when he met Tatsuya. Tatsuya was flamboyant and charismatic. He sported a huge tri-corner pirate hat with a big, red feather adorning it. He wore an embroidered vest with a harness for his cutlasses and baggy striped pants, going barefoot most of the time. The image any young boy would imagine if asked to think of a pirate, minus the hook or peg leg, but he did have a parrot. Tatsuya was a rarity among the pirates. He romanticized the pirate life, and was very poetic when he talked about what he did. His charm was enough that it was easy to forget this silver-tongued devil attacked ships and killed for money. But what had endeared him to Ryusuke was his code. Tatsuya never took slaves, never killed those who couldn't fight back, and didn't allow torture or abuse of captives being held for ransom. A rare code for a pirate. He also had instilled this thinking into his two daughters. When Ryusuke had first met him, Tatsuya had requested that Ryusuke join his crew before Tatsuya would agree to enter the pact. His eldest had just turned 16 and Tatsuya believed she should have her own ship. Which of course meant he was going to steal said ship from someone else. With Ryusuke's skilled help, he ended up getting not just a fine ship for his elder daughter, Mayora, but got one for his other daughter as well. The pretty younger daughter, Kochume, gained a huge crush on Ryusuke when he personally presented her with her new ship. She would follow him around and gaze longingly at him whenever they were docked somewhere, with Ryusuke remaining oblivious. He never understood why so many of Kochun's male crewmen seemed so jealous and ready to fight him all the time. Which amused Tatsuya to no end. Ryusuke looked down and thought, arguing with himself before settling on a decision. He looked up at the smirking Tatsuya. Tatsuya, I have to. Ryusuke floundered, unable to find the right words. He stopped when Tatsuya held up a hand. No need to say, you're leaving us, right? Tatsuya laughed at the surprised look on Ryusuke's face. You know, for a shinobi, you're rather easy to read, Tatsuya stated. Ryusuke shot to his feet in a defensive stance. You knew? For how long? Ryusuke questioned. Tatsuya simply smiled up at him and remained sitting. It was obvious from the first time we fought together. Sure, you might not be throwing flashy jutsu around, before you don't fight like a buccaneer. You wouldn't be the first ninja to take to this life, you know, Tatsuya said. Not to mention the way you organized the Freebooters Pact. Seemed like you were a man on a mission. At this, Tatsuya stood up and dusted sand off his pants. His face turned serious as he faced Ryusuke. I don't know what you have planned for us, but I tell you here and now, as long as you don't plan on betraying me or my daughters, you have my support. Ryusuke was taken aback. He had thought that he was doing a fine job keeping his cover. He cursed himself as he realized that he had let the Sekimoto pirate family get too close, and that he had shown too much of his real self. He also realized that he had underestimated the guile and intelligence of the Pirate King. You know, my girls and I would be happy to be employed by someone who appreciated our skills. We could even be useful if someone were to, say, need to scour the seas of a few disreputable men. Tatsuya then said. Ryusuke narrowed his eyes at the canny pirate as he responded carefully. I sure you would be helpful if someone needed that. I'll keep my ears open just in case. And yes, I am going to be leaving for a short while. I need to settle some things at home. Tatsuya just smiled and held up his hands, palms skyward. I knew it was about a woman. Oh, but my poor Ko-chan will be so devastated. She carried such a torch. He trailed off as he turned and started walking back to the ships. What do you mean? Ryusuke asked, as he followed bewildered. What torch? Tatsuya's responding laughter echoed out over the water. Sanctuary Ashara's office. Do you understand your mission? Ashara asked. Standing before him was a figure dressed in monk's robes with a wicker tengai. The woven bamboo hat was shaped like a bell, concealing his face before flaring out below his jaw. There was an opening for his eyes with 3 vertical woven bars. In his hand he gripped a staff very much like Ashara's own requiem staff. This young man was Kenasuke, brother to Ryusuke, and fellow student of Ashara. He was also a priest of the Kokuryukai, the Black Dragon Society. It was the closest thing to a religion that the Uzumaki had, though it venerated their ancestors and not any deity. Yes, Ashara-sensei. Thank you for this opportunity, Kenasuke replied. Kenasuke had just returned from a 2-year expedition to the remains of Uzushiogakure. On the 15th anniversary of the fall, as the Uzumaki had come to call the downfall of Uzushiogakure, Ashara had sent a team to reclaim what they could from their violated homeland. The younger generation had grown up on stories of their ancestral home, and were eager to find out anything and everything they could about it. Though it was difficult at first, shifting through so much rubble and bodies, Kenasuke had returned with many scrolls and items that had been sealed to protect them from looters. He had been pleased to find the clan head's holdfast had a wall of corpses 4 feet high all around, from the coalition foolishly trying to force their way in. But Kenasuke had only been able to retrieve a few of the clan's summoning animal contracts. Ashara had had the badger contract with him when he left Uzushio, and Ryusuke had signed it. At Uzushio, Kenasuke found the mantis contract and signed it. When he attempted a summon, though, he was informed that as the previous summoner had died without giving a recommendation as to her successor, he would need to travel to a summoning island and prove himself to a mantis there. The problem was that the Uzumaki only knew of one summoning island. It lay in the northern reaches of Kiri, in the southern Chigiri Sea. The only reason that Ashara was risking a mission there was because the Mizukage, Yagura, had apparently recently become unhinged. He was conducting a vicious propaganda campaign on his own people in some insane fear of bloodline limit families. That meant there was enough chaos for a small team to slip in and out. One more thing, Kenasuke, I want you to take the twins Kurukin and Kurisan. They can back you up, and they will gain valuable mission experience. Be careful out there, my boy, Ashara said as he laid a hand on Kenasuke's shoulder. I didn't spend all that time training you just for some Kiri fuckwit to take you down, understood? Kenasuke bowed his head respectfully. I will honor your teachings, sensei, he replied formally. Ashara stifled a sigh. As stiff as ever, hopefully the twins will help loosen him up. He needs to enjoy life a bit more, Ashara thought. Good, I wish you a safe journey then. The twins will meet you at the eastern gate at 0700 tomorrow. Dismissed, Ashara said as he sat down at his desk. Kenasuke bowed and left the office. Konoha Merchant District morning. Naruto was on his way to talk to the Kamiyamas, to see if Midori could come out and play. As he was turning a corner, he almost bumped into a blond man facing away from him. He stopped and was about to apologize as he recognized that the man was a Yamanaka, like those at the failed barbecue. His voice died in his throat when he overheard what the Yamanaka was saying. I'm so glad that the little demon ran crying and screaming from the party. Can you imagine if we actually had to pretend to be nice to that monster? What was the Hokage thinking, ordering us to be friends with that shit? I bet from now on that we don't have to deal with the little monster anymore, and the clan heirs will be safe from him, Fu continued, glancing at Naruto discreetly. I hope the little bastard demon just goes and kills himself. Rid the village of him for good, Fu stated firmly. Naruto couldn't handle anymore. His small remaining hope that he could find friends within the group of people that had invited him the other day was smashed. He turned and ran for his apartment, unwilling to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing him cry. For hours, Naruto took his grief and frustration out on his already battered furniture. He had just thrown a stool at the front door when it opened. The stool went flying outside, missing a surprised and concerned Mirobu by inches. Mirobu took a quick look around and sighed, slipping a dagger surreptitiously back under his robes. Naruto-kun, what are you doing? I thought you were being attacked. It sounded like there was an angry mob in here. Mirobu walked inside and shut the door behind him. Naruto just stood there like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He looked drained. Mirobu rushed over when Naruto just dropped to his butt. Mirobu put a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Do you want to tell me what happened? You don't have to, but it might help to let it out, Mirobu said gently. Naruto just nodded and got up to shuffle dejectedly to his couch. As soon as they were both seated, Naruto told him all about the barbecue fiasco in a dead, defeated voice. His paused when he got to the part about Fu. Swallowing hard, he managed to force the words past the lump in his throat. Mirobu was shocked, but he quickly buried it as pulled Naruto into a hug. That man was wrong to say that, and I can't believe that either the Hokage or your masked friend would set you up like that. And although we have to leave soon, I know my family and I will look forward to seeing you again soon. We're not going to abandon you, okay? So, please don't think what some other people say is going to change what we know about you, Mirobu said reassuringly. Really? You mean it? Naruto asked tearfully. Absolutely. Now, Miyuki-chan and Midori-chan are both eager to see you again. How about you have dinner with us, then stay the night, Mirobu asked. Naruto jumped up, pumping his fist in the air. Yatta, Miyuki-oba's cooking. He cried gleefully. Naruto grabbed Mirobu's sleeve, trying to drag him out the door. Come on Mirobu Oji, let's get going. A chuckling Mirobu allowed himself to be led out the door, marveling at how quickly Naruto could recover his sunny disposition. The next morning, Naruto was walking back to his apartment deep in thought. He nodded decisively and changed course for the Hokage Tower. Sometimes, it's good to be smart and ask for help. The words of the Hokage had kept repeating themselves in Naruto's head as he lay in the wagon's bunk bed with Midori snuggled up to him. Naruto was tired of crying. He was tired of feeling weak. Miyuki had off-handedly commented, "Don't let them get to you, Naruto-kun. We still like you," at dinner last night. That had been an epiphany of sorts for Naruto. Even though Miyuki had simply been trying to lighten his spirits, he had found those words to be profoundly wise. As he had lain in bed, he had resolved to thicken his skin. The villagers didn't like him? Fine, he'll just find people who did. People thought bad things about him? Fine, he'll just change their minds. He didn't want to cry anymore. He had people in this village who saw who he really was, and he was going to be strong for them. He remembered the worry present in Inu's voice, and on the Hokage's face that first morning in the merchant camp. He noticed the worried looks Mirobu and Miyuki both shot him last night, when they thought he wasn't looking. The worry the old man and Ayame Ne-chan tried to hide while serving him the day before yesterday. No more would he cause the people he held so dear any more anguish. He had made it this far, and he will take all the world had to throw at him. He wouldn't break. He will be strong. So he made a beeline to the tower, forcing himself to walk down one of the main avenues. It was still fairly early, so there were many merchants out setting up their stalls. Villagers getting a jump on their shopping for the day. Basically, the type of crowd Naruto would usually skulk past or avoid. Not today. He squared his shoulders and simply kept the tower firmly in sight, tuning out his surroundings. He was amazed how well he was handling it. His breathing did increase, and he felt stirrings of anxiety, but he ruthlessly mastered himself with a remarkable degree of self-control for a 5-year-old. He literally marched up the steps of the tower and to the Hokage's office. The Hokage's secretary, a no-nonsense woman in her mid-30s, gave an uncharacteristic giggle at the sight of Naruto. He had a strange look on his face, obviously intended to make him look serious and grown up. But with his 5-year-old body, he didn't quite pull it off. The secretary put a serious look to match his, announcing him to the Hokage with an imperious voice. Naruto walked up to the Hokage's desk and slapped his hands on its surface, which was just below his eye level. The Hokage's mouth twitched, but he realized that Naruto was being very serious. "Yes, Naruto-kun, what can I help you with today?" The Hokage replied in a somber tone. "I want training Gigi. Today, I'm going to be strong, and I remember you saying you were going to help. So help, please. Naruto stated each sentence like a general commanding his troops. Inwardly, Hiruzen was glad that the barbecue debacle had only made Naruto stronger and more resolute. Pride filled him at Naruto's maturity. You are quite right, Naruto-kun. I am impressed by your determination. In fact, I've been meaning to give you this. The Hokage reached into his desk and withdrew a folder, handing it to Naruto. What's this, Gigi? Naruto queried. That is the meal plan and exercises recommended by Chohiku-san. Do you remember her? From the academy? The Hokage asked. Naruto's brow furrowed in a thought a moment, then recognition sparked. Oh yeah, she's the one who measured me everywhere. She kept asking me questions and making do all these weird things with my arms and legs. She called me short, Naruto said indignantly. The Hokage chuckled. Well, those weird things were to test your body's range of motion. He then broke off at Naruto's look of confusion. It means how your body moves, where it's strong and where it's weak, the Hokage explained. Naruto, Ed in understanding, nodding with his hand cupping his chin. Anyway, you're to start with those exercises she planned out, to get yourself up to strength while I find a taijutsu tutor for you, the Hokage stated. He had originally hoped the Akamichis would be handling that, but he would have to change that thinking. If you have any problems finding the ingredients for or preparing the meals Chohiku-san recommends, just let me know and we'll figure something out, okay? The Hokage asked. Naruto nodded eagerly. Sure thing, Gigi, thanks. You're welcome, Naruto-kun. I look forward to seeing your progress. Oh, and before I forget, here. This is a pass allowing you to use Training Ground 9 when it is not in use by any ninja, the Hokage said, grabbing a scroll and tossing it to Naruto. Naruto looked at the scroll in hands like it was made of gold. He clutched it to his chest gratefully. Well, Naruto-kun, I suggest you get started right away, the Hokage said, and I'll get started finding you that tutor. Naruto nodded and ran out of the office, shouting over his shoulder, Bye Gigi, thanks. The Hokage just smiled and pushed his other paperwork aside, pulling out information files on various shinobi. Who to choose, who to choose. Konoha Merchant District that night. Mirobu entered his wagon after finishing locking up his stall and securing his goods. He regretted the fact that the caravan would be leaving within the week. He hated to leave Naruto alone so soon, but he could only hope the blonde could hang in there. He knew Naruto was a tough kid, though. When he passed the little alcove where he removed his shoes, he noticed something. The little porcelain good luck cat charm he kept a small shelf was facing the wall. That was a signal from his contacts that he had received a message, since it normally faced outward. He made sure he was alone as he subtly pressed the end of a board in the wall behind the charm. A piece popped open, revealing a small cubby with a small scrap of parchment, tied with a string. Quickly, removing it and restoring everything to normal, he pocketed the scroll. Later, when Miyuki and Midori had settled down for the night, Mirobu sat down at his desk. Removing the parchment from his pocket, he untied the string and unraveled the message. It was heavily encoded, but Mirobu had memorized the cipher long ago, as per his training. After decoding the message, he was astonished by its contents. He decoded the message another 3 times and reread it over and over, hoping it would change. Finally, he had to come to terms with reality. For a moment Mirobu just slumped back in his chair listlessly, gaping off into space. Shaking his head, he roused himself, remembering to dispose of the message. Only one thing occupied his thoughts as he burned the message in a small ceramic bowl he kept just for that purpose. Miyuki's going to kill me.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.